another one, and another one. It's so gorgeous. It's another beautiful day in North Carolina, y'all. Y'all should really be here to see it. You know what I'm saying?
Let me share this with you. It's too much to put on camera, but I'll tell it. On the night before the march, we had a meeting, and I shared with the group that the police prohibited us from having any weapons, concealed or unconcealed. By the way, they saw the Klan conceal all of their weapons and drive 4 or 5 miles across town and never stopped them, and never told us. But I argued that the Klan had no history. I had no idea that they were planning to come, but I said to people who said that this is dangerous, I said, well, it looks dangerous, but I don't have any knowledge of the Klan riding into a black community where hundreds of black people live in the middle of the day with the police there and starting something. Especially, we have a reputation of being militant. They don't know whether we're armed or not. So I argued that that this prohibition was probably set up to get us to violate it, you know, and then we would be arrested by the police. And so we compromised that 3 people had weapons, but they were not of any magnitude. And they were going to ride ahead on the bicycle and make sure that people weren't up on bridges and places. None of that ever happened. So a couple of shots were fired back. But one lady had a pistol with 2 barrels on it, looked like out of the 1800s, with only 2 shots. We had no idea that this kind of assault would happen. I was compromising more to satisfy those who felt endangered. We were in no way prepared for the kind of onslaught, the murderous onslaught that befell us. And then this whole thing got reframed as a shootout. It's like a cannon is being fired at you, and you have 1 or 2 22-shot things. So I don't deny that shot was fired from us, but it had no real effect. And
it was not initiated.
It was not initiated.
It wasn't a shootout.
It was a desperate attempt to try to defend yourself when you were effectively disarmed by the police. And Cooper, who was later convicted or found liable for wrongful death, knew these people were armed. He took pictures of them loading them in their cars. And I'm ashamed of our leadership talking about white supremacy in your government. And then 25 years later, when South Africa joined us in helping to build a truth process, Archbishop Tutu came over here twice and worked with us, sent Bukani Finker, who was a part of the Truth Commission in South Africa. We went down to Peru and met with the International Meeting of Truth Commissions and got encouragement for them. And then the City Council of Greensboro voted to oppose the truth process. All 6 white people voted to oppose it. 3 black women voted to support it. And then they made the outrageous claim that it had nothing to do with race. Almost none of what I'm sharing with you now has been made public. So we have endured the burden of demonization. And it has affected our children. I had options to leave here, and I chose not to leave because I felt that it was important for me to stay in Greensboro, to carry on the work that we had been carrying on. And the best testimony for who we are is what we did for the last 40 years.
Mr. Nelson, rather Reverend Nelson Johnson, here to short cameo from his wife, Joyce, as well in there. They did the interview together, but that snippet, mostly Mr. Reverend Nelson Johnson. Decals, Context of White Supremacy. Gus T. Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information with non-white people, victims of white supremacy, on what white supremacy racism is and how it works. Today's date, Monday, March 17. Put that green beer down, 2025. So I have been told. We at the Cow's lengthy history, and we've been on the air for 16 years, we have done a lot of work on North Carolina history, just lots of it, more than I can even get into. Certainly the 1898 purge in Wilmington, we're just talking about that last month during Black History Month, but we had Christopher Everett as a guest on the program twice, talking about his fantastic documentary, Wilmington on Fire. Lots of great information. Wow, with this book, well, North Carolina history specifically, we had Dr. Jason Miller on the program. We talked about Dorothy Cotton and that old polecatting Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So many different ways that we've talked about various aspects of North Carolina history. And then today's book specifically talks about so many different aspects of North Carolina and U.S. history that we've covered in so much detail. Where to even begin? Although it's not North Carolina history, Gene Seberg supporting the Black Panther Party, being tarred, Negro lover, losing her child, committing suicide. We talked about all of that in great detail. Romaine Gary's White Dog, special place in the Catherine Massey Book Club. And then now I'm aware of 4 books that at least briefly make a connection between the Atlanta child murders, so-called, beginning in 1979, they tell us, and the .22 caliber killings. Whew. Hasn't Gus T. been talking about going to Buffalo? Peyton Gendron left a racially restricted region to go shoot up the grocery store in Buffalo. And I said, this happened before. .22 caliber killings. Now people said, Gus, how did you know that this happened in Buffalo before? And I said, reading is more important than watching television. I've watched documentaries on the Atlanta child murders and the .22 caliber killings. Neither connects to Atlanta. Now I'm aware of 4 books that do make that connection. There was a congressional inquiry, 1981, that also made that connection. Conspiracy of racist violence against black people. And I said that congressional inquiry, they didn't even mention Jonestown. Anyway, but there was lots of overlap in the text. The biggest bit of overlap by far, COINTELPRO is at the center of this book. I'm so glad we have talked about that lots and lots and lots on this program. The very first page of the ISIS papers, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing says, you should not talk about racism, white supremacy if you have not read the book, Racial Matters, the FBI's secret file on Black America from 1960 to 1972. Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly, white man, 3-time guest on the Cows. We talked about that book twice. It is so important, the widespread systemic nature of all of this criminal and pervasive activity against black people. What was Dr. O'Reilly's line? They've been spying, because his book doesn't start with the civil rights movement. His book starts with Marcus Garvey. He said that is so nefarious what J. Edgar Hoover did. They didn't even have an FBI. Then they had a Bureau of Investigation. They said, we're going to get that Marcus Garvey. Let's go. Let's see if we can figure out something. You think he broke a rule or something? He said, dang, how do you start going after somebody and they didn't even break a rule? We're just going to go after them and we'll figure out what they did wrong later. That's the origins of the FBI. But COINTELPRO, so important. Dare I say, if you are ignorant about COINTELPRO, this story might not make a whole lot of sense, especially when they get to some of the outrageous claims and such from all of this. But our broadcast for today, Reverend Nelson Johnson just passed away earlier this year, 2025. I posted the obituary from the New York Times, which, wow, my thinking about that is very different having finished this book for today. But I posted the obituary, and someone groused and complained, like, oh man, they didn't even call him, talking about Reverend Johnson, they didn't even call him a reverend, and they left out a lot of important information from his life and times. Certainly, and even the New York Times' own history of reporting on Mr. Johnson, but that could have been a whole book, which we got today. As a result of Mr. Johnson passing, I said, hey, I should go and get more information. We should study, do a program. This is the book I found. Morningside, the 1979 Greensboro Massacre and the Struggle for an American City's Soul. For the people who are not aware, we'll get into all of the details, but November 3, 1979, black people, white people, non-white people going out trying to, produce justice, better wages for laborers, white and non-white, oppose racism, produce justice, right? Shouldn't be anything wrong with that. Oppose the Klan, oppose racism. They go out for this march. The Klan shows up. They end up shooting people, killing 5 people: Caesar Kaus, Dr. James Waller, William Evan Sampson, Sandra Neely Smith, and Dr. Michael Nathan. Sandra Neely Smith, black female. The rest, I believe, are all white, the rest of the victims. But 5 people killed, others injured, total melee. Again, November 3, 1979. And this book, Morningsides, deal with that entire, what shall I call it, shameful, terroristic episode in North Carolina state history, really chapter of racism, white supremacy, global spectrum. Nelson Johnson, the late Reverend Nelson Johnson, right at the center of all of this, and hey, by many official reports for many, many years, blamed. When they say who is most to blame for all of it, that no count Mr. Johnson, it's his fault. And all of this happened when he could have been killed in the middle of all this. The author of the book that we're chatting it up about today, Morningside, the 1979 Greensboro Massacre and the Struggle for an American City's Soul, which was just published last year, so pretty new text. The author spent time up at Cambridge, studying at Harvard. He's a journalist and narrative historian. Obviously written quite a bit of non-fiction. Additionally, he's lived in Costa Rica, Cuba, and Mexico, and by evidence, he might not be the best writer in his house. Joining us live, our guest, Aran Shetterly. Mr. Shetterly, you with us, sir?
Nice to be with you, Gus. Thanks for that amazing synopsis of history. There's a lot to talk about, but I just want to say how wonderful it was to listen to Reverend Johnson's voice and to remember all the hours I sat with him listening to this history and how privileged I felt getting to hear his version of what happened there and so many other things throughout his remarkable life. So thank you for playing that.
I thought that would be the best way to start and incidentally to conclude the program. To let's just hear, especially since he got blamed for all this for so many years, let's just hear from him directly, and he had so many amazing things to say. Bravo, Reverend Nelson Johnson. And you did hear a cameo from his wife, Joyce Johnson, as well. Amazing also. Bravo, both of them. Back to you, Mr. Shetterly. For listeners, might be their first time hearing from you, hearing about your book, Morningside. anything that you would like to tell us briefly about the work that you do as a journalist and writer?
I'm interested in stories that are about, people who have the courage and conviction to try to make the world a better place. And I'm really drawn to those. And often, we know about some of these stories, but there's so many people who have committed, amazing, dedicated lives whose stories get lost. And, I've made it a mission to try to reclaim some of this. And when I, heard about this history from both Nelson and Joyce Johnson in 2015, sitting with them, I couldn't believe I'd never heard about it. In a way, I felt tapped on the shoulder that this was a chance to, make a contribution and get people to understand what it is they'd been through, what had happened in Greensboro, and also importantly, Greensboro's place in the world, which I think is much more important than a lot of people realize when it comes to, the Black freedom struggle.
That's brought out in great detail in the text. North Carolina, very important location with regards to the system of white supremacy racism. For listeners who maybe haven't seen you, and this is a new book, so probably have a lot of folks who've not read this book yet either, you are classified as a white man. Is that accurate?
That is accurate.
Right on.
I am. Yeah.
Sorry, did you have more?
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Sorry. No. Go ahead.
Right on. For this program, we start definition. I use the term racism and the term white supremacy as synonyms. I use the same definition for both terms. That definition, a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you think such a system exists? Do you think that definition is accurate?
That's a really interesting question. One of the ways I'm going to answer that is, was watching Nelson Johnson's journey and development and his ideology evolve over his life. And one of the things that happened was, he started out sort of following King, and then he got into Black Power and Pan-Africanism. And the idea of thinking about power in terms of, in any term other than racial terms, white versus black, was not something he felt comfortable with. But over time, he evolved to think of it to include in that. I'm not saying it's either or, it's not. It's a combination, class and economic systems. And so what he evolved into was someone who understood not only these sort of racial hierarchies that have been placed into this world culture that you're describing, but the global economic systems that maintain them. And I think that is such an important way to bring those two concepts together. And what makes it so persistent in many ways, right, is that the power can co-opt a lot of different people into that economic system and make them feel comfortable, even as they're participating then in subjugation of other people. And so I think that is a really important thing that I understood more deeply spending time with Reverend Johnson and Joyce Johnson.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that I get that correct. You did study at Harvard, is that correct?
I did.
Okay. Intelligent white man. One of the ways that I have concluded that white people deliberately practice white supremacy racism is to not answer non-white people's questions, or to be circumloquacious, where they talk a long time. It makes you think that they answer the question. This is widespread.
Did you think I didn't answer the question?
You did not. Hang on one second. This is very important. Okay. This is very important. This is one of the things that I ask with our white guests for years. if you could make sure you answer the question that is asked. We have listeners, they might want to ask questions. We have lots of North Carolina listeners. So if you could make sure you can give the nuance, what have you, and even if it's something you don't agree with, no problem. But it is very important that we make sure we get an answer. So I'm going to try this one more time.
Sure. I thought I answered it, but go ahead. Try again.
Mr. Shetterly, racism.
Yeah.
I use this term as a synonym with the term white supremacy. The definition I use for both terms: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you think such a system exists? Do you think that is an accurate definition?
I think it is an accurate definition. I had to think about it because it's a complex definition in a way, and it's making me put some things together that I hadn't quite in the way you have, but I think I agree with that. Yeah, I think I basically do.
Don't let me, I think the metaphor they use, put words in your mouth, or if you don't agree.
No. Here's the point to me is I think, at what we've come to understand to some degree, right, is that race is biologically speaking something of a fiction, but culturally speaking, it's been a very powerful tool used to subjugate people around the world, and this invention of white versus black has been used to do that. And so I think I agree with what you're saying.
Just want to point out for listeners, details so important, because I didn't say white and black. I said white, non-white. Very important.
And I agree with that too. I was stuck in the American model for a second there.
For sure. That happens often. And even for our listeners, we've had even health professionals who've spoken with us over the years, people who study the health field. Dorothy Roberts, first one that comes to mind, because she's visited with us so many times, that white supremacy, racism, as he accurately said, is not biological. However, white supremacy, racism is real, and that reality is so powerful, it does have a biological impact on non-white people that people often speak about as though, yes, race is a biological concept. No, just white supremacy, racism does have a biological impact on non-white people, for sure. Nelson Johnson is not with us anymore. And this is so important for the context, what we heard, the apology, all of that. I have asked our white guests for years. There was a non-white author. He wrote a piece in the New Republic. He was talking about racism specifically. He wrote, "White people are often greatly and sincerely pained by racism, but rarely are they pained enough." And I've been asking our white guests about the first portion of that sentence. You are a white man, you write about racism, wrote this whole big book about racism in North Carolina. Based on the white people that you've been around, your studies, family, friends, do you think that there are a substantial number of people classified as white who are often sincerely and greatly pained by racism?
Yes, I do. I feel like I spend a lot of time around people that, and probably not by accident. They're the people I feel most comfortable with, to be honest with you. And so, yeah, I've gathered those people around me.
That is that. I'm gonna have to go to a different question as I pause on that. But he said yes. We got it. Much obliged for your answer. Yes, surrounds himself with these white people who are dedicated to, who are sincerely and greatly pained by racism. Is it true that you, Mr. Shetterly, that you grew up not in North Carolina but in a rural part of Maine, New England? Is that true?
That's correct.
Okay.
I grew up in a little working class fishing village on the coast of Maine. My parents were not from Maine. My mother was from New York. My father was from Ohio. They went there to They'd participated in civil rights activity before that time, but went there really to live as simply and economically on the land as they could so they wouldn't have to pay taxes that would support the Vietnam War. And so I grew up in this rural village with a lot of people who were very different than I was. You might not know it by looking, if you judge by skin color, but very different culturally, very different in a lot of different ways. And so that was actually a really interesting education for me to come from, is to understand some ways that difference worked without actually having it be applied in terms of race yet. And so my deeper racial understandings came later in college and beyond.
I see. Just for Maine, for our non-white listeners, Catherine Massey Book Club, Sundown Towns, A Hidden Dimension of American Racism. I don't think it's hidden because they got billboard signs, but either way, he writes, in 1890, every county in the state of Maine had at least 18 African Americans except one with just 2 and another with 9. By 1930, Maine looked very different. Now, 5 counties had 8 or fewer African Americans. Several showed striking drops in their black populations. Lincoln County from 26 to 5, for example, and Piscataquis from 19 to just 1. Hancock County dropped from 56 in 1890 to just 3, yet Hancock had more than 30,000 people in 1930. Geography does not seem to account for these declines. The counties with fewer than 8 African Americans were sprinkled about, not concentrated in Maine's isolated rural north. He talks about all of New England basically being one gigantic sundown town, racially restricted region where no black people are allowed, and then almost the entire continent, or not continent, but at least the entirety of the U.S., one massive sundown town where black people are really only allowed in very small little pockets, certainly not Maine. So all of the difference that you just talked about. Well, hang on one second. I had a question there. Did you actually grow up around black people in Maine?
No, that was my point. I didn't. But the other thing I wanted to say is what you had in Maine during that time, and I don't know if the author you're talking about talks about this, is there was an intense Klan presence, right? So at the same time the Klan was rising around the country during that very period you're talking about, it was also happening in Maine. And in Maine, they were. It sounds like they were going after the black people there, which doesn't surprise me in the least. But they were also going after the Catholics. They were also going after the Native Americans. They were also going after other immigrants. They were also going after Jewish people. So the Klan was extremely active in Maine, going after all of those un-American people that were living there at that time. That's true.
I'm sure you have that in your text as well. The Klan has other folks that they are not cool with besides black people, but James Lowen in his text does include the Klan activity in Maine, but he also does emphasize that by far the greatest victims of all of this were black people, and it is not close by any stretch of the imagination. Same thing actually that they said with racist Joe. In fact, did you hear any racist jokes growing up in racially restricted Maine?
Most of the racist jokes I heard growing up in racially restricted Maine were about Native Americans who were more present than African Americans when I was growing up. But you know, there were all kinds of jokes. Yeah. So absolutely. No question.
Now that is a new one. Do you remember any of these jokes that they told about Native American people in Maine?
I don't, to be honest with you. I don't, but I definitely heard them when I was a kid.
Wow. Okay.
You know,
they didn't
jokes about, you know. Go ahead.
You said it didn't. You said jokes about.
No, I was going to mention Peter Pan and, that movie and all sorts of, red man jokes and things like that. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, but you don't remember them joking about black people just because they weren't present?
No. I'm sure they did. Oh. Yeah. I mean, there were jokes about all kinds of people, but absolutely that was part of the humor, I'm sure.
Okay. That now, see, those racist jokes and the fact that these racially restricted regions, one, are so prominent, that both are so prominent, both of those, as well as the story Morningside, all of that evidence, because it's so voluminous, makes me think that white people, at least there's not a substantial number of you all, people classified as white, that are greatly pained by racism. Does that make logical sense, just following evidence?
I remember, I guess that what I'm struggling with in terms of your question right there are at what point, when the pain happens, right? I mean, I guess I'm not sure if you're asking me, did I feel pain when I was 9 years old? Some, but not what I would feel now or felt later. So I guess I'm not sure what to make of a 9-year-old at that point, other than, growing up in a system that accepts things like that are creating pain. Absolutely. But that's not the end of that 9-year-old's journey. That's the only point I'm making. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with it, and I'm not saying it wasn't right, but that's the beginning of a journey, not the end of one. If that makes sense.
Now, that's another one. You didn't answer the question. I just said, following logic, looking at the evidence because there's so many thousands and tens of thousands of the racist jokes, and there's so many of these racially restricted regions across the land, and even what you write in Morningside, there seems to be a lot of evidence that would suggest that there are not large numbers of people classified as white, like yourself, who are sincerely and greatly pained by racism. I just asked, am I being logical based on evidence?
To be honest with you, I can't answer that question. I don't know. I don't speak for all white people. I mean, I'd have to do a survey. I'd have to really understand it. I mean, I would, in terms of real numbers, absolutely look at this election. There are a lot of people who are not pained at all. But to go and say, in some part of Vermont, how do people feel about it? I don't really know the answer to that question at this point. Historically, I think you're probably right, but I don't feel comfortable speaking for white people in different places where there don't happen to be black people right now.
Right on. I've told non-white listeners before, because that is so common where people say that, I have never asked a guest to speak for all white people or all black people. In fact, I was very explicit, Mr. Shetterly, when I asked this question. I said, you are a white man. You study and have been around white people. You study racism, wrote a whole book about racism. I just asked for your opinion, not to speak for all white people. And in fact,
that was my opinion.
Hang on one second. Hang on one second. Hang on one second. Yeah, I'm gonna hang on because you're interrupting me, and I didn't interrupt you. I allowed you to speak. Hopefully, you'll allow me the same courtesy. But I did not ask you to speak for all white people. I just asked based on evidence. Does it seem like there are a lot of white people who are sincerely pained about racism based on the evidence? That's all I asked. Now, if you say you can't speak for all white people, I never asked you to do so. That is suspicious, and I think that is an act of racism. When a white person says that, I've never even heard anyone say, can you speak for all white people? Like, that would be such a curious statement to even make, but no problem. You said you can't answer it. No problem. Moving to the book. Specifically, Mr. Shetterly, were you trying to solve a problem with Morningside, the 1979 Greensboro Massacre, and the struggle for an armed city's soul? Were you trying to solve a problem with this book?
I was trying to solve a problem of lost history, and I was trying to solve a problem of a community intensely divided over what the facts of that history were and what they meant.
Facts of that event and what they meant. I have to process that as we're walking through the book. Given that, you said, people were divided about this event, and you certainly talk about that in the book. Did you have an intended audience for this book? Like, did you sit down and say, okay, I want this book to be an academic book where scholars, maybe North Carolina historians will read it? Was this a lay person's book? Was this a book that you wanted for just everybody in North Carolina to read? Who did you have in mind? White people, non-white people? Who did you have in mind was going to be reading Morningside?
I had in mind a general audience that included North Carolina and beyond North Carolina. So, yes, a lay person reader was my intent. I tried to write it as a narrative in a non-academic language that would make it accessible to a broad population of people, yeah.
Broad population, so everybody, white people, non-white people, everybody.
Totally, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you, as a white man who grew up in racially restricted Maine, where they told racist jokes about Native Americans, what drew you to talking about this really important segment of 1979 North Carolina history?
What drew me to that story was all our responsibility to try to tell the truth about our history, and that it would inform me about who I was and what country it was I'd grown up in. And at the same time, to tell the story about people who I felt were heroic in the Johnsons and some of the people around them also, in trying very hard to believe that positive change was possible in this country and that they could be agents of it.
Wacky. Wow. Again, Mr. Aran Shetterly, Context of White Supremacy. Did you encounter any resistance? Did any people, let's see, we'll pick two different ways. Did you encounter any resistance? One, from folks saying, hey, this is so-called black history, and you are a white dude, your Harvard education and all. This is not your story to tell. You're not even from North Carolina, so get on out of here. Or did you get anybody saying, yeah, hey, you shouldn't be telling this story because it's 2025. You're talking about something that happened last century. Why are you digging all this old stuff up to just get everybody all riled up and upset all over again? This is like 50 years ago. Let dead dogs lie. Did you get either one of those?
I got the latter. I didn't get the first one. I got the latter, which was, and this was very powerful. In fact, I was yelled at over the phone by the former mayor of Greensboro during that time, saying almost word for word what you just said. Why are you digging this up? This has been looked at. There's no reason to do it. You're wasting people's time. And I got that from a number of city leaders, if you will, in Greensboro, and including ex-police officers in Greensboro. So, yeah, I got that frequently.
Wow, I'm not. But importantly, you said none of the first. You didn't have anybody tell you, hey, you are a white man. You don't have a right to tell this story. This is black people. You didn't get any of that.
I'll tell you why I don't think I got that is because I went down to North Carolina. I sat with the Johnsons, and I asked their permission to get to know their story and possibly write about it. And they allowed me that trust, offered me that trust. And I think that when they offered me that trust, a lot of the people who felt the way who might have felt the way or articulated the way that you suggested in that first question, felt more comfortable because they had trusted me.
Wow. So you're a white man, Northerner, even. He's a Yankee. He's a Yankee. So this is a Harvard-educated white man.
Yeah, I'm a carpetbagger, Gus. I'm a carpetbagger.
See there?
There you go.
So he's coming down to North Carolina, prying into their history from last century even. Did you get any black people, I don't know, Mr. Johnson, his wife Joyce, or any other black people who said, whoa. I've had a tough time with Whitey, and I don't know. I just don't trust you. I don't want to talk to you. Get on out of here. I don't fool with white people. Did you get any of that from black people?
Honestly, I really didn't. I got some suspicion from former Communist Workers' Party people who had been red baited and whose stories had been manipulated, and felt that they had been betrayed by journalists in the past and were uncomfortable, and I had to earn their trust. But I would say that happened more. I mean, I don't remember having what you're talking about happen to me, honestly, as I researched this, and I talked to scores of people.
Wow. That was the impression I got. If folks, if you're a North Carolina resident, you should probably own this book. It has a lot of really important information, I think. But the footnotes, that alone, because it seemed like you already told us you spoke with the Johnson, seems like many times maybe, and then many other black people throughout the narrative, seems like you sat down and talked with them also maybe many times through the course of putting this book together. So I kind of got that impression, but always best to ask.
Absolutely.
I was fascinated in this text. For the word Negra, you have N -- and then A. What was the thought process behind the, I guess, partial redaction, we'll call it, around the word Negra?
You know, and I am going to answer this question directly, but in a slightly circuitous way, Gus. So if you don't like the answer, I will come back to it. But I was very fortunate to have as an editor at Amistad a black man named Patrick Bass, who's from North Carolina, and whose first job was at the Carolina Peacemaker in Greensboro in the 80s. So he had some sense of this history, and that was very important to me, and very important, I believe, to the book and the credibility of the book, to have him overseeing the production of this narrative and this history. So when we talked about it, he felt very strongly that that was the right way to present this book, because he didn't want to, and I agreed with him, make it harder for people to read on. And I thought, you know, that makes a lot of sense to me. Why cause, everyone knows what it is, but why add that little extra bit of discomfort if this history is important? So that was the conversation we had, right or wrong, and I felt comfortable with it at the end of the day.
I see. Much obliged for sharing. Much obliged, Mr. Bass. There are other racial slurs in the book. Kike is in the text, and it is not redacted. They have the whole word spelled out. I am not an advocate for sanitizing the record. I am of the opinion, and you even have in the text, there's been a lot of obfuscating and redacting and sanitizing things. Like, if they didn't say, I'm going to get me a bomb to get these Negras, they didn't say N-A or N-word and all of that is the great
No,
big
they sure didn't.
They said Negra. Like, man, and I say this too because of all the obfuscating and lying and sanitizing. Sometimes they don't say Negra. Sometimes it'll be other terms that I'm not familiar with, and they'll do the same thing, and they'll have the same reasoning that, oh, it's too painful. Nope. If individuals who are classified as so-called Jewish, if they are mature enough that they can read this text and see Kike and not, oh my gosh, I got to throw Morningside away. Come on, let's spell it all out. What did they say? They said Negra. And I even remember I questioned a different white author. We read Curtis Wilkie's book, about evil in Laurel, when evil lived in Laurel, when they killed Vernon Dahmer. And in the text, he quoted these race soldiers who bombed and killed Mr. Dahmer, but they didn't call him Mr. Dahmer. They didn't call him Vernon Dahmer. They called him the Dahmer nigger. And he quoted exactly what they said, and he did it so many times. By the time it got to the end of the book, I was thinking and saying, the Dahmer nigger. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. His name is Vernon Dahmer. Vernon Dahmer. Sorry, Vernon Dahmer. But I said, I'm so glad that he did that, because they didn't call him Vernon. And apparently all the time, we're going to get that Dahmer nigger. We're going to get that Dahmer nigger. Don't sanitize. That's what they said. Write that down. So when they get to the hit, I'm an adult. We're striving to be men and women. Just say what they said. Quote them accurately. That's my thought process. Not that I respect Mr. Bass, but I mean, did you all have a discussion about the term kike? Because that is in the book, correct?
It's a great point. We didn't. Great point. Well taken.
No argument with Mr. Bass. Just I get different perspective. I'm so glad you shared the thought process with me. Much obliged. Okay. For people who maybe we got younger listeners, they don't know. This is old-timey dinosaur age history stuff that we're talking about, November 3rd, 1979. If you can kind of set up the day, I want to read a passage from the book that I think is important to kind of set all of this up. But this is on page 86 of Morningside, chapter 4, The Shooting. You write, most of the shooting had taken place right in front of Ed Boyd's position on the south side of Everett Street. He'd seen the long pistol push dark smoke into the air. He'd watched people run from it. He'd filmed the clattering stick fight as it erupted near the middle of the caravan, and then observed impotently as a group of men from the last car, the canary yellow van, calmly took weapons from the trunk of the penultimate car, the blue Ford Fairlane, that Eddie Dawson had positioned in front of the van, and started firing. Not randomly, Ed thought. It seemed to him they aimed with purpose at specific people in the crowd. The former Air Force enlisted man believed he'd witnessed a well-executed military operation. Flush people toward unseen shooters, fight them to slow them down, then pick off the intended targets one by one. By his count, 5 or 6 people lay dead or dying, and he was accurate. It was 5 fatalities. Can you kind of give us your synopsis of what transpired on November 3, 1979 in Greensboro?
Yeah. So Nelson Johnson was the leader of this Communist Workers' Party group in Greensboro, North Carolina during this time. And what they had done was go into the mills there, which were still some of the largest textile mills in the whole world, including the mill where Levi's dungaree material was made for over 100 years. And they were trying to organize the workers there and organize them across race and make the argument that they'd be much more powerful in their demands to management if they could come together, all the races together. And so they decided to hold a march through Greensboro on November 3rd, 1979, to bring workers together and to hold a conference about the history of dividing people around race in labor in this country and the effect that it had. So they were setting up that morning, getting the sound truck ready, singing some songs, and all of a sudden a caravan of neo-Nazis and Klansmen drove up, and as Ed Boyd told me, the cameraman picked a fight and then began shooting and left a scene of carnage behind them. And it's important to note that, as Nelson did in the intro, that this was in a black neighborhood at the edge of a black housing development and in the middle of the morning. And he thought, with some reason, that he didn't believe that they would actually dare to come into that space, but they sure did.
I'm skipping ahead a tad. This is Chapter 6, Narratives, and this is Bill Dill, a young camera operator. And so enforcement officers, these are FBI officials, they come to check out the footage that they got from this melee. You write, the men followed Bill into a small production room and crammed in around him. Bill sat down, jammed the tape into a player, and nervously fumbled with the console controls. The violence that had taken place just hours earlier shimmered into two-dimensional action. Rewind, one of the men said. Freeze it, ordered another, as if the young black man were an extension of the technology he operated. Pause for Dr. Kevorkian color monitors. Continuing, rewind again. Play it slowly. Pause. Around Dill, the white agents spoke freely, naming the Klansmen and Nazis on the screen. It seemed to Dill that the men weren't watching to discover what had taken place, but to confirm what they already knew. Had they been watching what had happened? He wondered. And if they had been watching, or knew as much as they seemed to know, why hadn't they stopped the shooting? Now, I'm just skipping forward a few pages because I think you give the answer as to why they did not. But, whew, wow. This is in the same chapter, Chapter 6, Narratives. You write, they'd already lynched Jim, thought Nelson. Exhausted, haunted by thoughts of what had transpired, Nelson Johnson willed his mind blank, shifting his focus beyond the room and the throbbing pain in his injured arm. He had been stabbed during the melee. He tried to kill him. Beyond these men he would never trust. They couldn't threaten him into informing on his comrades. He turned his chair around, faced the cement wall, and gave the FBI agent and the detective his back. Eventually they sent him back to the cell. The earth kept turning. Morning would come, and at some point they would have to release him. As the night wore on, Nelson's hunch that the police absence at Morningside was intentional hardened into certainty. Late on the night of November 3, one of the police officers on duty at Morningside arrived at home. His wife asked how he was. We didn't get the Negra. See, that's one where, man, N-word is not
I
what he
agree with
said.
you. I don't disagree with you.
He didn't say N-dash and all that. We didn't get the Negra. He responded angrily. Decades later, she'd say she knew her husband was referring to Nelson John. Now, that right there, woo! You talk about smoking gun. It's a whole lot of niggers in North Carolina. How in the world does he come on? Oh, we didn't get that nigger. Oh, that Johnson nigger is still like, what? What? And Johnson is in jail. We didn't get the nigger, but he is in jail on charges for, like, what in the world? I don't even know how to, can you, just that last one, because you got the footnote for that, can you, the significance of that statement beyond, we didn't get the nigger?
Well, I'll tell you, Gus, this was, I spent time in Greensboro at times looking over my shoulder, to be honest with you, and wondering with some of the things that I was finding and hearing if anyone was going to come after me, because some of these policemen in the book are still alive. And when I heard that quote, I had heard rumors about quotes similar to that, but I had never been able to put my finger on someone saying, I heard this happened. And when I heard that, I thought, holy smokes, just as you're saying, it's one thing to hear rumors and that can be gussied up a little bit. It's another to hear someone say, this is what the man said. And absolutely chilling, terrifying, and fit. This is the important part for me. It fit into the context of the perception of Nelson Johnson in Greensboro. It wasn't an outlier. It wasn't erratic. It was part and parcel of being called by the mayor the most dangerous man in Greensboro. So it was an extension of that, but a violent one.
Troublemaking Negro, my goodness. You on
Absolutely.
same chapter narratives you write on the inside pages of the November 4 Greensboro Daily News. So next day, a short article began, Nelson Johnson, the leader of the protest rally in Greensboro Saturday, is no stranger to violence. They wanted to kill him. His presence at the Saturday violence marked the second time in 10 years Johnson has been a leader in activity that brought death, destruction, and injury. Nelson had been in and out of jail in recent years, the article reported inaccurately, making only cursory mention of his years and successes as an advocate for the city's working poor. And talk about how this has been part and parcel for better part of the last 40, 50 years or so, but just basically saying, hey, the person who is most to blame for all of this, the Johnson Negro. is that basically how we've been told to think about this for like about 40 years?
Yeah, and my hunch is, to be honest with you, that story that I'm pointing out there was a plant story by law enforcement. Now, I don't know whether it was the local police or whether it was the FBI or the State Bureau of Investigation, but I'm pretty sure that was, what we call today a stovepipe story, right? That went right from some officer or agent to a journalist they trusted who published basically what they wanted them to publish.
And that's why I said, if you're not familiar with COINTELPRO, many aspects of this book might seem wacky or unbelievable. Like that is a major component of the COINTELPRO campaign, which is talked about in great detail in this book, deliberately putting stories in major newspapers and deliberately lying, deliberately leaving out information to discredit frequently black people, non-white people that were trying to work against racism, some white people who were doing the same thing, but that was a lot of it during this time period. No reason to think that, hey, this probably continues right now. I guess to the threat component, were you at any point, because that is an important point. This involves allegations that the FBI and local North Carolina enforcement officers wanted Nelson Johnson, black male, to die, and presumably some of these white Communist Worker Party workers and other black, maybe even some of the black people at Morningside too, that they wanted this to happen, implicating them and informants and all the rest of it. Were you threatened at any point? Did anything, dangerous happen, suspicious happen in putting this project together?
No, nothing happened. I had some paranoia because it seemed so present. That was the thing. When I walked in and heard the energy behind the way people told stories, it makes sense to me that the Johnsons and the people who were victims that day are still engaged in trying to get their history told properly and correctly have energy. That makes total sense to me. But to hear the energy of the people who didn't want it talked about, and to hear their vehemence about that, and to hear how present their energy was in order to block the story to some degree, that's maybe it shouldn't have been surprising to me, but it was a little surprising, and certainly made me wonder where the end of that energy was, if you know what I mean. So yeah, but it ended up just being paranoia on my part. Nothing happened.
Context of White Supremacy, Mr. Aran Shetterly, his book Morningside, the 1979 Greensboro Massacre and the Struggle for an American City's Soul. I guess quickly before I get to some of the important history about the Johnson family, what the title, I just gave it out, and you've already told us Morningside, the name of the public housing development where this terrorist attack occurred on November 3rd, 1979. What was the thought process behind the title, or I guess the subtitle, The Greensboro Massacre and the Struggle for an American City's Soul?
Well, one of the things, the reason I chose Morningside because it was the site of this place, as you've mentioned, and this terrorist attack. I agree with that. I mean, that was the site. It was also, it's such an evocative name, and a name that suggested that the world turns, is that scene you read of Nelson and sun's going to come up. And that was something that I took away from them, was this constant struggle and refusing to just dwell only in the night, that the sun's going to come up and they're going to keep working and walking. And that was something I wanted to capture in that evocative title. In terms of the second half, what I'm signaling there in my mind is that this is a story that happened in a specific place, but it is a story that to me is so much bigger and talks really about how this country works and the white supremacy at play in this country, the way labor is treated, and the way law enforcement works, and the way change is resisted. And so I thought that the struggle for the soul was not just the soul of Greensboro, really, but the soul of this country. And I mean, I think we're seeing elements of this play out every day. We always see elements of this play out every day, but it's being rather crystallized right now.
Much obliged, much obliged. You give some of the background information on the Johnson family and how they come to this neck of the woods in North Carolina. You talk about white supremacists, slave owners, Samuel Thomas Thorne and John Davis Thorne. They make the trek from Louisiana. Louisiana pops up so frequently. We talk about them for so many. This book, Louisiana, pops up even at the end with Hurricane Katrina. I forgot about that. Like, man, Louisiana, right on. Anyway, so they make this trek from Louisiana to North Carolina. This is in chapter 8, Thorne. Joining them on the journey were several black Thorns, related not only by name but almost certainly, given their various shades of skin, by blood, to the white Thorns, the men and women who worked the plantation owners' land and tended to their household and personal needs, the people the landowners claimed as property and on whom they depended economically, also faced an uncertain future and difficult choices. I'm skipping ahead just a tad. Same chapter. You write, one sultry night, shortly after he'd left the Air Force, Nelson put on a sport coat and headed for a juke joint near Hollister. Welterweight, trim, strong, and confident after his tour in the Air Force, he approached a beautiful light-skinned woman and asked her to dance. Blacks from the nearby hamlets and towns called Hollisters straight-haired, light-skinned, and light-eyed residents issues. Some said they were Native Americans. Others insisted they were descended from white loggers who set up camp in the nearby pine forests after the Civil War and socialized, and it's in quotes in the text, with local black women. Whatever the racial roots of these particular people in Halifax County, the term issue historically referred to free blacks who'd been issued, again in quotes, papers that verified their status in the antebellum South. The blood of the enslaved and their masters mingled in these free blacks who gripped a precarious and incomplete serving of privilege. By the mid-20th century, on the outskirts of Airlie, the term merely indicated skin tone and eye color, the deeper origins obscured by a fog of complex, often painful, racial histories. I read both of these sections and even a few others where you're talking about some of the slave origins. And I said, man, when we are talking about some of these folks are related almost certainly by blood to their white Thorns, do we mean some of the white slave masters raped some of the black females? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. What Nelson would call nighttime integration. Yeah.
Got it.
And that's what he meant by that. Mm-hmm.
As a book published well after the whole Me Too movement, is there a reason that we can't, since it would be historically accurate to say that this is rape, is there a reason to not say that these white slave masters raped some of these slaves and that's how we got all these different shades of color?
No, no reason other than feeling like I was telling the story more closely in these parts to the words that were used by the people I interviewed. So when I interviewed Nelson Johnson and I interviewed his brother Ivan and I interviewed his sister Mickey, these were more the words they used. And so I tried to honor those.
Okay. Well, again, I'm pointing this out just because it's important, and white people say that this is important around the world. You are a Harvard-educated white man. Nelson Johnson is not. 1. 2, words are very important. We agreed this is rape, and we've had many historians, white authors on. No contest. You cannot consent.
Oh, yeah. I'm not arguing with that.
Right on.
Yeah. Not
hang on a second because you're interrupting again. Hang on one second.
Oh, I apologize. I don't mean to interrupt. Yeah.
Thank you. But you do not have in quotes here the first portion that I read. This is not a quote where it's the blood that that this almost certainly that they shared blood with whites. That's not in quotes. So these are not like you took this as something that Miss Joyce Johnson said or Reverend Johnson said or a different black person. Words are important, and it's various times in the text where this is referred to. It's never called rape, and I call this out because white people have a pattern of not calling this rape. Even on the plantation, they'll come up with romance and love and even try and suggest that they had some sort of relationship or what have you. It's rape on the plantation every time, and I humbly submit every time when white people write about these arrangements and they don't call it rape, we get these old goofy, phrases and euphemisms. That is a willful act of racism. Did you want to respond, Mr. Shetterly?
Well, there is a place it gets called rape, which is in the chapter when Nelson Johnson is having the conversation with the Klansman when he drives down to Mount Ulla. And at that point, it does get called rape.
I did have that highlighted, but go ahead.
No. So, listen, you're expressing an interesting point of view, and I'm not arguing with whether it was rape or not. It seemed to me you picked up immediately on what was being discussed, and I expect most of the readers would too, but yeah, you make an interesting point.
I'm not trying to be ignorant. This is about historically accurate, and particularly because black people like myself get accused of rape so frequently when it's not even true. There's no contest. This is rape, period. And that, as I'm pointing out for listeners and someone myself with a history degree, this is widespread and has been for years. Even years after Me Too. It's almost been a decade from Me Too, and it's still, if it happens on the plantation, can we call this rape? Immediately, every time. You still have to bring that up. Next, let's see. And even that pig scene, I did highlight that. That's at the end of, that even doesn't count because that's at the end of the book. You can't bring it up and talk about it over and over.
It's not at the end of the book.
The pig scene, the one where he goes, Mr. Johnson.
It's in the middle. It's in the last third of the book, but it's not at the end of the book.
That's at the end of the book. That's my opinion. It's at the end of the book, and it's already been talked about several times by
then. It didn't feel like it when I was writing it.
Rape. At any rate, and it is a lengthy book, I will admit that, but there's so much information in it. It is lengthy, but wow, it does have a lot, and I mean a lot of information about white supremacy racism. All right, so we get the Thorn slave owner terrorists. They trek from Louisiana, get to North Carolina. They bring the Johnsons' ancestors with them in all of this. Let's see, move forward a tad. This is a few chapters later in the text. You write, this is chapter 11, love, that word. In the company of his network of activist friends, Nelson Johnson's evolution from the patriotic youth who deserted the family farm accelerated. He began to understand the problems he witnessed in the Grove to be due less to racist attitudes than to entrenched racist policies enforced by public and private institutions. 3 weeks after the Orangeburg shooting, which we've talked about before, the National Advisory Commission on Civil Disorders, known as the Kerner Commission, for its chairman Otto Kerner, validated this point of view as it analyzed the cause of the urban rebellions during the summer of 1967. In language as bracing as words penned by James Baldwin, the Kerner Commission observed that, direct quotes, what white Americans have never fully understood, but what the Negro can never forget, is that white society is deeply implicated in the ghetto. White institutions created it. White institutions maintain it. And white society condones it. End quote. We were just talking about James Baldwin on Friday, all the time. Anyway, the question I wanted to ask now, this is a quote from the Kerner Commission, but you did include it in your text for a reason, I suspect. So when they say, collectively, the commission, that white Americans have never fully understood that white society is deeply implicated in the ghetto, white institutions created it, white institutions maintain it, white society condones it. How can that be that white people are in charge of all of this, but they don't fully understand that they're in charge of all of this? How can that be?
That's a good question. I mean, I think because in a sense, they're so used to it, they can't look outside themselves. I mean, I think there's something to that. And then I think there are some people who are very much aware that they're in charge of this and expect to be able to do anything they can to maintain it. So I think it's not one size fits all, so to speak, on that answer, but I certainly see what you're getting at there. And so yeah, some people definitely use it, understand it, and exploit it in order to maintain privilege and power.
That was an important snicker at the beginning of his response there, non-white listeners, victims of racism.
My snicker?
Yes, sir. You remember you gave us a quick little chortle before you began your response?
I don't, but
it's in the recording. It's in the recording. You snickered a few times.
I'm not arguing with you.
For sure. You said you didn't remember it. I'm just jogging your memory, hopefully. But that was an important one. My question would be
what
this.
Does important mean, Gus? I don't really understand what you're getting at here.
That was a significant
important how?
Snicker. Well, let me ask this question. Hopefully it'll elucidate. One, you are informed about what racism, white supremacy is, how it works as a white man, because you wrote this book, correct?
I try to be.
Well, this is another one.
Yeah.
Can we answer the question?
I take it very seriously, if that's what you mean. Yeah.
This is another one, if we can answer the question. So again, as a white man, Harvard-educated white man, you are informed about racism. You wrote this whole book, studied all that good stuff. You're informed about racism, yes?
Yeah, I try to be. I think I am. Yeah. And, there's always more to learn.
We're all still learning. Neely Fuller Jr., for sure. For this system to be maintained, right, system of white supremacy that we agree exists, started at the beginning of the broadcast, that same system, that's what they're talking about in the Kerner Commission report. Now, that's 1967. Now, we're, encroaching on 60 years from all of that. For that system to still be in place and to not have eroded or fallen apart due to neglect, you would have to have individuals classified as white, like yourself, update that system, correct?
Listen, one of the legal terms that was used by the lawyers in this case in the final trial, the federal civil trial, was deliberate indifference. And I completely feel that there is a lot of deliberate indifference happening. Now, deliberate indifference in the legal term, when you say deliberate, as opposed to just indifferent, is criminal. It's intentional. And absolutely, I think that is a part of our history. If we read all our government reports that have been written throughout the 20th century and actually listened to them and actually adjusted our society based on those government reports, like the Kerner Commission report, we would have made a lot of changes that have not been made in this country.
But we haven't. This is another one where I didn't get my question answered. And even I remember another one because I hadn't heard this one before in your text, Mr. Shetterly, the doofus defense. I said, I'm going to have to write that one down. Like, wow. The doofus, well, I'm just, but I got it. And that comes up so frequently that white people are dumb and ignorant, blah, blah, blah. And what I'm saying, the doofus defense does not work for, wait a minute, 1967. We had system of white supremacy racism. We're almost at 2027, and we got the same system of white supremacy racism. For that to be, you have to have white people who are updating and refining that system. Is that true, Mr. Shetterly?
I think I just said yes. Yeah.
Okay. You didn't answer the question.
I think I answered
That's why
that
I asked
question.
again.
No,
okay.
I really did, actually. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we got it this time for sure. Thank you for indulging me. If you got white people that are updating that system, they can't be ignorant, correct?
Well, some of them certainly aren't. Fact.
Can't be doofuses if you're updating a global system of domination. And I'm just pointing out for listeners, again, we're talking to a Harvard-educated white man who was reluctant to tell us, yes, I am informed about racism. He wrote a whole book that is cover to cover.
No, I don't. I think, Gus, I didn't. It feels honestly that the reason I hesitated was because it felt a little bit like a trick question. I mean, I've just written a whole book about racism. I mean, and also, am I going to say, yes, I am informed? Do I know everything? No, I don't. That's the only hesitation. I live in gray areas, And so when you ask that question, what I'm thinking is he asking me to say I know everything about racism? That's what I was thinking. And I thought, no, I don't. That was the hesitation. Of course I'm informed about racism. I've spent years studying to try to understand it. I mean, I guess I don't really understand the point you're making.
We don't do trick questions. That's another one they said before. We don't do trick questions here, Mr. Ship. You write about serious subject matter. You're not writing jokes and things. You write about serious subject matter. I think Nelson, that's
Absolutely.
what I said. Nelson Johnson, I think, is serious subject matter. If I had wanted to ask you, do you know everything there is to know about racism? I would have asked, Mr. Shetterly, do you know everything there is to know about racism? That's not what I asked. I'm just saying, frankly, that's another one I'm going to put down as disingenuous because I have never asked anyone, do you know everything there is to know about making pizza, making egg rolls, traveling, rowing a boat? I mean, that is absurd, suspicious act of racism right there, I think. Chapter 19, you write, and this is just one because you might have extra information that I don't know. We're talking about North Carolina, so this is a little off subject, but you included because of the time period. You write, talking about what do they call House on Un-American Activities and all that jazz, beautiful history of the 20th century in the USA. Harry Haywood, the most prominent Black Communist Party USA member, argued that an autonomous black belt republic, a nation within a nation, should be carved from the Deep South's plantation territories. The Soviet General Secretary Joseph Stalin supported Haywood's idea, and American communists got to work on the Negro question, in quotes. The Communist Party USA members courageously helped build sharecropper unions in the Jim Crow South and defended non-black teenagers in Tennessee, known as the Scottsboro Boys, against accusations of raping two white women, helping to fuse civil rights to communism in white supremacists' minds. Did this case happen in Tennessee?
In Tennessee? I thought that was the Virginia case, but it could be. Sorry. Yeah.
I thought the Scottsboro boys case was in Alabama, unless I've been greatly misinformed.
Did I say Tennessee in the text?
The version that I have, unless I'm on chapter 19 and I have the E version, but
no, I think it was a different case.
I'd
have to go back. You're asking. No, I'm not sure. You're asking me about a detail in here that I turned in that draft a while ago. I haven't reread that section, so I would have to look at it with my own eye.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard this one before, but that's such an important case, and unless I've been greatly misinformed, the Scottsboro boys case is Alabama, not Tennessee. If folks have other information, they can let me know. I don't know, maybe that's one that slipped by or what have you. But accuracy is important. Try and get that out. Anyway, and the book is not about Alabama or Tennessee.
I'd have to check it.
Right on.
Yeah.
Much obliged for that. Alabama is not the subject matter here, nor is Tennessee. Back to the main subject matter with Greensboro. This is a little bit further along, chapter 20, Frogmore, where, wow, I learned so much from this here text. Wow. You go through some of the, and you already talked about a little bit, so many of the, the iterations in the life and times of Reverend Nelson, because he wasn't Reverend before. He was a communist by his own definition, branding. Communist, active in the civil rights movement, and becomes a Reverend later on in life. He has so many different thoughts and changes, all working generally towards justice and trying to replace white supremacy with justice. Earlier in his life in North Carolina, you write, chapter 20, not yet ready to heed the advice of Amilcar Cabral, who we talked about before in the program, a consensus formed to eschew alliances with white progressive groups, which they deemed divisive and disruptive. This prohibition extended to so-called blacks who are married to or who sleep with hunkies, and he spelled it Hunkeys. What in the world? The bedroom cannot be separated from the battlefield. Members from Oakland who disagreed with this rule were purged from the group and sent home. I was staggered. Did you get to talk to him about his thought process behind this and what motivated his stance around this issue? There were all these documents. That mostly came from documents that were reported back because this group took careful records of what they were doing. They were serious about, the decisions they were making and sort of and creating a paper trail. And so I was reading through the documents, and the spelling of, hunkies was in that document, and all of this detail. And I talked about it a little bit. Clearly it was something that he had felt like there was at one point when I was talking with Reverend Johnson when he said, I staggered around in the wilderness for a long time. And I don't quite agree with that assessment. I think he was staggering isn't what he was doing, but he, had moved beyond some of the ways that he had thought at these different times. And that was one of them. Wow. I was fascinated for many reasons. You, I don't know, it seems like it's public because you mentioned your wife in the text. Your wife is classified as a black female. Is that accurate?
Yes.
So someone like yourself would be like, no bedroom integration, get on out of here. Did he know that your wife, you would be someone that would be disqualified from organizing with? Did he know that about you?
Oh, yeah. We met at the same time. When I met the Johnsons, I was with my wife.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's in the book. That's right. You all were together. That's in the book. Okay. Wow.
Oh, we've been married for 20 years, man.
Wow. That is amazing. That, just for listeners, now you came from racially restricted Maine. How in the world does a white dude from racially restricted Maine end up with a black female who incidentally wrote Hidden Figures? That's why I said I think it would probably be undisputed based on evidence that you are the second best writer in the house. But either way, Yeah, how does a white dude from racially restricted Maine end up with a black wife, and you all have been together for 2 decades?
Love, Gus. That's the only way it works. Love. What else could I say? That's the answer. We found each other, and we were the right people for each other, and we're both fortunate.
You spent so much time living outside the country. Where did you all meet?
In New York City.
New York. Okay, here. That is fascinating. And then they both have books about racism. Fascinating. Let's see. Before I nab our folks who dialed in, make sure I don't miss North Carolina callers. Were you familiar with COINTELPRO before you wrote this book, or when you decided to write this project, did that spur your interest to learn more about what COINTELPRO was?
No, I was very aware of what it was, what COINTELPRO was, and I had also my first book, The Americano: Fighting with Castro for Cuba's Freedom. I document the way the FBI interfered with the Cuban Revolution in great detail. So this was not my first go around with understanding the FBI's impact on history and on movements and on people's lives. And so, yeah, I was absolutely aware of it, but I learned a lot. And as you were talking earlier about going all the way back to Marcus Garvey, one of the important things that comes out about the FBI is, COINTELPRO is a name, right? It doesn't mean that the things that made up that were placed into the category of that name weren't happening before and didn't keep happening after. And that's one of the central pieces of this story that you've obviously spent time thinking about.
I thought that was a great point in the text. He said that you could just remove the name COINTELPRO and just do the same thing that you've been doing and call, well, we have an investigation, and do the exact same thing. Black identity extremist. That's what Reverend Johnson, that's what he would be now. We got black identity extremist in Greensboro.
Right.
In fact, I was stunned, Mr. Shetterly. We just did a whole program on the history of white supremacy racism in U.S. public libraries. Wow. You talk about still learning. Whew. When I got to that part where you shared that J. Edgar Hoover had worked as a librarian and he transferred those skills to the FBI for his filing program, I lost it, Mr. Shetterly. Come on. And then I was thinking about, because I've looked at some of those COINTEL files and wow, are you serious? You take the Dewey Decimal System and apply this to how I'm going to file my information that I've gathered on my niggers from Marcus Garvey, Julian Bond, Nelson Johnson. Wow. Just bravo. That was a great, we've done whole programs and talked about J. Edgar Hoover. I had never seen that before. Bravo, Mr. Shetterly. Let's see. Folks who dialed in with a hand up, caller victim ×3. Do you have a question for Aran Shetterly, author of Morningside, the Greensboro 1979 Massacre? Victim.
Yes, Gus. May I be heard?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir, for taking my call. Greetings, Mr. Shetterly. Thank you for spending some time with us. I won't, take long. My first question, do you think it's will be logical, considering how you were able to go in and get this information from non-people unsuspected of anything? Do you think, considering what you learned, would it be logical for non-white people, black people, to suspect all white people of being a racist?
Well, sure. I mean, I think that's a reasonable, to some degree, way to approach the world, but it's also a choice. I don't think it's the way that Reverend Johnson and Joyce Johnson face the world. I think that they want to believe in the possibility of every human person, and discover that rather than presume that, and allow actions to speak. But I can certainly understand facing the world that way.
Okay, thank you. So logical. Thank you for that. My next question is, you are a Harvard graduate. Did I hear that correctly?
That's correct, yeah.
Yes, sir. The time that you were attending Harvard, what would you say would be the black to white enrollment of the student ratio? What would that be?
I think the black enrollment in my class at Harvard was certainly well under 10%. It might have been around 4 or 5.
And has that changed? Are you still in contact with the school?
No, I'm not. I mean, I wouldn't feel comfortable telling you what the percentages are now. I doubt they're what they should be. I would stand on that, but I don't know. I couldn't tell you a number.
Okay. My next question is, I believe earlier, I guess you said you were asked about jokes that you heard about non-white people, black people in particular. And you said you heard a bunch of different jokes, so all type people. Did you hear any white jokes?
Yes. I mean, yes, in fact. So, for example, there was a great deal of, I think I could use the word prejudice, between different towns in Maine that were economically different. And there were jokes about, people from the next town over. I heard a lot of jokes about people from Newfoundland, Canada. I grew up very close to the border of Canada, and I heard jokes about Canadians and Newfoundland, people from Newfoundland. So yeah, I absolutely did hear jokes about white people. In fact, there were tons of jokes. I think if I had to tell you what the jokes about people in terms of race or ethnicity that I heard most growing up, they were probably about Polish people or Italians. I was growing up in a very Anglo-Protestant part of the country. So yeah, 100%.
Okay, thank you for your response. I'm really interested in your book, but I am an impoverished black male. Do you think if I were to provide you with a mailing address that I can get a signed copy from you?
You mean that I would just send it to you?
This is more of like a compensatory investment request.
Well, I'll tell you what. Pretty much every public library in North Carolina has my book, and I really like to support public libraries. So I would suggest maybe you go to one of those libraries and check it out. I don't know where you live, but I'm also going to be doing events in North Carolina in a couple days, in April in Greensboro, and again in May in Greensboro. And so if you're close to any of the places where I'm going to be and want to come and meet and talk about the book, I'd be happy to talk with you about it.
That would be interesting, but I am on the other side of the country.
Okay.
Okay, so no investment. Okay. So my last question is, you used a term earlier, and you brought it up, I guess, in the book about your relationship. You used the term, love is keeping you together. What is your definition of love, sir?
Oh, I didn't use that in the book. Oh, no. That was in response to Gus. He said, how did I end up with a black woman, right? And how did we end up together? And he's probably going to say I didn't quite quote him right, but I'm not intentional to not get what he said quite right. But all I was saying was that we're best friends, and we enjoy each other's company, and I enjoy spending every day I get with her. So I don't know what more to say than that. I'm not going to be philosophical about it.
No, sir. I know. I'm not asked to philosophize. Just more of a definition, if you may.
I think I just gave one as best as I could. I consider her my best friend, and I wake up and want to spend every day with her. So that to me is as good a definition as I can possibly give.
Thank you for your time, Gus. I will mute my line.
Thank you.
Our caller 0185. I guess really quickly, the current percentage of black students at Harvard is near 15%. We'll have to check to see, because that's numbers circa 2023. I know this because I attended the Seattle International Film Festival last year. They had a documentary film, the worst film I saw at the festival by far, admissions granted. It was all about Harvard, their affirmative action policy, and gripes about racism for non-black students. But they put up the graphic 15%, and importantly, they said at Harvard, it would be your offspring. They said at Harvard that 15% black, most of them not born in the U.S. and or obese, they have one white parent. I thought that was really important as well. But yeah, that's good old Harvard. Admission granted, 2 thumbs down. Were you there when Obese was there, or he was way before you?
I think
President
he was before
Obama.
me, but that what you're talking about there, I heard an interview with the writer Danzy Senna, who's the novelist who's married to Percival Everett, and she was talking about that very subject that you just talked about in terms of the mixed race people attending these elite institutions and being counted in the African American population. Not that necessarily they shouldn't be, but that's predominantly who's filling up those numbers. And that was a really interesting conversation I heard with her. I think it was on the New Yorker Radio Hour, in fact. I just wanted to mention one thing, Gus, that the Scottsboro Boys actually they were on a train traveling between Chattanooga and Memphis, Tennessee.
Outstanding. Accuracy is important. He has Tennessee in the text.
Yeah.
Anywho.
Yes. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
The caller 0185, did you have a question for Mr. Shetterly? You should be with us, 0185.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Oh, man. I did. Like, what happened?
I heard him at first.
Yeah.
I can't hear him now.
I did too.
Can you hear me now?
Okay. Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Now
okay.
we can hear you.
Yes.
I accidentally put myself on mute. Mr. Shetterly, do you think it's right that you should benefit financially from telling stories or citing histories that even the people who are still residents of that area are afraid to talk about and tell? And we hear about this as a constant historical issue amongst non-white people being threatened to tell their own stories and not getting $1 million publishing deals in order to benefit financially from.
Well, I can promise you I didn't get a $1 million publishing deal, and that the way I was able to do this book, in fact, was through some grants from the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Virginia Humanities, and bootstrapping my way along with this book. So, I was able to do it, and I'm extremely fortunate to have been able to do it. And I worked on it for 7 years. What I hope, and what I say when I talk about this book, is this is one book. There are so many other versions of this history and adjacent histories, and I would love to see those be published. I don't think it makes sense to think about this in a zero-sum way. In other words, that because I wrote a book, someone else can't. I don't. I think there's always room for more books, different perspectives. Someone could write a better book. Someone could write a book that's more visceral in terms of the point of view because they experienced it. I would encourage that and celebrate that. So I hope that, by sort of cracking open this history the way I've done, that it empowers more people to try to tell their stories. I would hope that would happen.
Gus, can I get a flag on the play, please? Another question not answered.
Metaphor. We don't have flags. Just, question. Did you have a question?
Yes, the question was, do you think it's appropriate for you being a white man benefiting financially from telling black stories that non-white people do not benefit financially from?
Well, I think that in this case, I can't tell you I've really benefited financially from this. This is where you're hearing me hesitate because I have not made any money on this project. So I could, and if the only reason I would be because at some point someone was interested probably in making a film or a TV show out of it. And if that were to happen, I have an agreement in place with the Johnson family about how that would happen and how they would participate in that too. So I actually feel pretty comfortable about the way that I have handled this and gone about the work and made sure that the people whose story I'm telling.
All the libraries that you just said that the young man who previously asked the question could go to the library and get a copy. Those copies were free, obviously.
I don't think that Gus wants me to go into a long discourse about how the publishing industry works. But Gus, if you'd like me to, I can. But no, those were not free copies. But I can tell you at this point, I'm not seeing a penny of any of that. So we can talk about how it works, but I think the assumption that I'm making a lot of money from this book is misplaced.
Much obliged, caller 0185. I guess to the point about the finances, this book hasn't been out that long. This book just was published in 2024. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's only been out a few months.
Okay. Wow. Oh, so it was, wow. Okay. So pretty much hot off the presses still.
It's been out, 4 or 5 months? Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Very new book. So, dang, has it been out long enough for you to know how people in North Carolina and Greensboro specifically, how they have received what you've written? Have you got feedback from them specifically?
Yeah, and some really wonderful, powerful feedback from people there who, feel grateful that this story has been told.
Is it in public libraries? Like if you go to the Greensboro Public Library, can you easily nab a copy of this book or other bookstores in town?
Oh, absolutely. I think I would be. I don't know the coverage, but I know, for example, at one point, I think I was told there were, I can't remember if it was 8 or 10 copies at the Durham Public Library, and they were all checked out. So, yeah, they are in a lot of places in public libraries.
Okay. And you said you're doing speaking engagements in the region in the upcoming days, weeks. Is that true?
I would say book presentations more than speaking engagements. Yeah.
Okay. Where are you going to be at specifically so people can know?
I'm going to be on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, the 19th. I'm going to be at the Durham County Public Library. On April 19th, I'm going to be at Scuppernong in Greensboro. And on May 17th, I'm going to be participating in the Greensboro Bound Literary Festival.
Okay. Oh, so we got some time in advance. So springtime, that sounds pretty cool. The Greensboro Bound Book Festival, that's in May, springtime. So the weather will probably be warm. You can go outside, get your summer clothes and all that, and listen, hear some great Greensboro history, ask a question or two if you heard from the broadcast. So, okay, folks in the North Carolina region, there you go. Check it out. You can go and hear Mr. Shetterly present what I think great, and ask him a question about COINTELPRO if you go. With the Scottsboro component, I did just, you said specifically in the book, because this was about the communist workers, that they worked to defend the Scottsboro boys against accusations of rape. That was not in Tennessee. The Scottsboro boys were defended in Alabama, and the case is called Scottsboro because it was in Scottsboro, Alabama. So, to be technical, that is an error. This is not a Tennessee case. This is an Alabama case. That notwithstanding, in the text, the attorney, I just have to read the quote specifically. The footnote, because the footnote on this one as well, wow. So for the whole footnote, everything, you write, when the Attorney General and Freedom of Information Act guidelines were issued, police forces in cities and towns all around the country destroyed or moved off-site reams of intelligence files. In Greensboro, officers spent days shredding civil intelligence files. I even want people to think about that now. How much material is it that you have to spend days shredding? How many boxes do you have? Anyway, days shredding files, including what they'd collected on, of course, the Negra, Nelson Johnson, Joyce Johnson, and Sandy Smith, one of the victims who was actually killed in all this. The Greensboro Truth and Reconciliation Commission final report, this is the footnote, Greensboro Police Department and the Communist Problem, page 125, cites a July 19, 1984 deposition with B.S. Ford, in which he admits the department shredded files, and specifically those related to Nelson Johnson. This is another massively important component. It's really difficult for me to accept, Mr. Shetterly, that white people are ignorant about racism when, both sides of this. How are you ignorant about racism? You have, where do you even store all of this paper where it requires days and whole teams of white people to just spend a whole day shredding and shred? We don't do nothing. Take cigarette breaks and shred documents that seems like mostly about that Negra. That's the one. Like, did the Johnsons, Joyce, and them, did they have like boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of paper on all of the white people and racists in North Carolina?
No, of course not. Oh, wait, you mean did I interpreted your question, Gus. Let me see if the reason I laughed, because I thought you said, did the Johnsons have those documents?
Right, yes,
are you
that's
talking
what
about
I said.
The police or the Johnsons?
The Johnsons, okay. Johnsons, Nelson and Joyce.
Yeah. So, of course, so easy answer. Of course not.
Right on. Yeah. That's what think now, I'm saying this book has so much amazing information. Now, even think about that. Now, imagine if the Greensboro Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and that's all those decades later, imagine if they had access to even half of all of this that was shredded. Matter of fact, even, let me fast forward to Henry C. That's why I said, now, if you understand COINTELPRO, wow, this book is way, way more interesting. If you have already oh, I know what they were up to and killed Fred Hampton, and maybe they killed Dr. King too, and all that. Malcolm X, we had all the recent revelations. You had these black males locked up for all those years, and they didn't even do this, and you know all that. The more informed You are about all of that. Wow. When we get to this part of the text, and he gets to Henry C. Byrd Sr. and Officer Raymond Bell. Now, this is what I think is way later in the text. This is chapter 32, Coat, C-O-A-T. And so everything has happened, and they're kind of going back and adjudicating what happened, what didn't happen, blah, blah, blah. So they give this dude, Henry C. Byrd, and he's, criminal, did this insurance fraud scheme, whatever. He writes up this report. Man, police officers, Greensboro got me out here selling drugs. What? What? He doesn't want to sell the drugs, thinks he's going to get in trouble, flushes them. Now he's got this big debt. He's got to pay all this money back to this enforcement officer. And the officer says, hey, instead of that debt, that Negro. What? 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 I keep reading. He writes specifically. Make sure I go back here. Though they didn't indict any police officers, the grand jury did indict Henry C. Byrd Sr. for perjury. The trial of the Klansmen and Nazis would take place a year later, but Byrd's trip through the justice system traveled at a pace, thought Lewis Pitts, that was possible only if a prosecutor and judge agreed on the urgent need for trial. Byrd was arraigned on May 2nd, less than 2 weeks after being indicted, and brought to trial in federal court on June 14 at a trial of simple choice was presented for the jury. Did they believe Byrd or the policeman who contradicted him? In the witness box, Officer Bell, a gung-ho cop with full support of the Georgia Police Department, looked to Byrd's lawyer as if he were about to explode with fear. What? As lawyer Bob Warren attempted and failed to force the Greensboro Police Department to turn over its informant payment records, which they probably shredded, he would say in court that if what his client said were true, it's likely that Bell's activities weren't meant for personal enrichment or only personal enrichment. Rather, Warren suspected they may have been part of a police department scheme to create a secret fund independent of city oversight with which to pay informants like Byrd or Eddie Dawson, who was a part of setting up this massacre at Morningside. The stocky Brereton, who presented the case against Byrd to the grand jury, sat at the prosecution table throughout Byrd's trial. By the first week of July, the jury declared Byrd guilty of perjury. Lewis Pitts called it an if there's smoke, there's fire conviction, a quick trial, not to find the truth, but to discredit and silence Byrd and keep the reputation of the police department and possibly the FBI intact. Appeals would carry Byrd's case up the legal ladder until finally it died on the doorstep of the Supreme Court when the nation's top justices declined to hear it and sank back into the deep reservoir of murk and mystery that haunted the November 3rd shooting. Man, do you think it is possible? Like even half of this, like, hey, you didn't sell all the drugs we wanted you, so in lieu of that, get that Negro. Do you think there's any realm where that's possible? That could have been, based on what you've seen, Mr. Shetterly?
I was skeptical. And then I saw the original document, which was Henry Byrd Sr.'s letter, handwritten, and the level of detail in it was remarkable. He talked about how people looked. He talked about where that cop put the bag in the car when he was driving him around to collect the money. He talked about what happened when he walked into the police department and who he talked to and where he sat and who else he saw. And so, I felt that it was my duty as a journalist to put this episode in there. I couldn't obviously draw a concrete conclusion and say what Mr. Byrd said was true. 100%, but it had enough detail in it to have a degree of authenticity. And when I knew the degree to which the police department truly hated Reverend Johnson, and the way they talked about him, and the way trained policemen being trained were taught to be wary of him and to dislike him without ever meeting him, I thought, this falls within the realm of possibility. And I did hear other rumors about how the Greensboro Police Department created a secret fund to pay informants off the books. So this letter by Byrd and the thoughts by Warren to some degree corroborated that possibility.
Wow. Just wow. Even all that aside, let's move the assassination over here for a moment. And even that, I'm going to get, this is the police getting did I just say Malcolm X and they put 2 black dudes in prison for 60 years that they know did not commit this murder? We're going to get a black dude. You go do it. So it's none of the Klan didn't kill Reverend Johnson, no good Negro. The Nazis didn't kill. This no-count drug dealer hoodlum killed. Mr. Byrd killed Reverend Johnson. Then we'll kill him too, or put him in jail. Like, what? My head hurts. And again, if you don't know anything about COINTELPRO, that is crazy. I don't know why Mr. Shetterly even put that in the book. You know that. It is footnoted, by the way, but that is bonkers. He knows that's not true. Whew. I even think the slush fund part of it, where, yes, we get black people to sell drugs so that we can make money off the books and then do whatever we want to, which also might include hit projects. Who knows? Like, what? Mm-hmm. What? That's another one where I would, now, who is more informed about racism, what it is, and how it works? Whew. Wow. And this pops up repeatedly. Now, he have to rewind a little bit. Going back, this is 28 Revelations, chapter 28 Revelations. You write, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms had fallen into the church committee's blind spot, important metaphor. The full set of orders and directives that governed the BATF operations still remained classified. Years later, Cecil Moses would say that if the personal relationships were good, the FBI might get around the 1976 guidelines that limited the Bureau's work by outsourcing projects to the BATF. Not subject to the same scrutiny or restrictions that limited the FBI, the BATF could infiltrate an agent into a group and, in the words of one BATF official, offer someone the opportunity to violate the law. Direct quote. What? Neither Woodall nor the Nazi Wood knew that in the hours after the shooting, Moses's men had met with Butkovich, I think that's Bernard Butkovich, I think that's how you say it, and his BATF handler Robert Fulton Dukes at a motel on the outskirts of Greensboro, or that Dukes was no stranger to the agents. Later, it would be discovered by the Communist Workers' Party's lawyers that the FBI, as suggested in conceptual terms by Moses, coordinated the Butkovich operation with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Now, I think for folks who do not have an understanding of maybe different law enforcement agencies, the use of informants, COINTELPRO, this might be a little difficult. Can you help folks maybe grasp how all of this helped coordinate an environment where you have, yes, the FBI, local North Carolina enforcement officials, white supremacist Klan Nazi officials all coordinating together to hopefully assassinate Nelson Johnson and then these other 5 members during the November 3rd massacre? Can you kind of help make sure folks understand how this whole informant process is working?
Sure. So up until about 1976, the FBI had informants everywhere. including there were Klan klaverns in North Carolina in which 7 out of 8 members were FBI informants. So they were informants informing on informants. And what you can argue at that point is that the FBI was actually running the Klan. They weren't just listening. They were actually directing what the Klan was doing into the 70s. So that's an important point. The church committee comes in 76 and says, cut this out to some degree. And they say you can't use informants indiscriminately like this. You have to have a very specific reason for potentially a threat in order to do this. And so a whole bunch of informants at the FBI went off the books, including Eddie Dawson, who is the man, a central figure in my book, because he had been an FBI informant, becomes a Greensboro Police Department informant, and leads that caravan of white supremacist shooters to Morningside homes on November 3rd, 1979. Now, the FBI had limitations. They were being scrutinized, but they wanted the information. They wanted to run operations like we are talking about here. And so, there are multiple agencies working in North Carolina. There are local police forces. There's the State Bureau of Investigation. There's the FBI. There's the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and others. And what they could do is they could say, listen, we can't get an informant into that Nazi group, but can you get an informant into that Nazi group, to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms? And the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms did get an informant into that Nazi group who delivered them. So this was not a Nazi member, so to speak, who is providing information, but an actual law enforcement officer who joins up with this Nazi group in Winston-Salem and is in a perfect position to be able to tell people what the intentions are of these Nazis on November 3rd, 1979, and what their plans are, and that they're going to bring guns. And yet, and this is what, Nelson mentions at that very first piece that you played, is that no one told the activists that there could be trouble. No one warned them that if they went on a march, their lives would be in danger. And that really is where this comes down, where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, is that there was plenty of opportunity. The Greensboro Police Department, the BATF, the FBI, and probably the SBI all could have told these activists that they thought there could be trouble and that they should reconsider what they were planning to do. And none of them did it.
Importantly, you start the book, Officer Wise, she gets the call, communication, hey, fall back. We don't even need you to be there, where, as you stated, they know, that Nigger Johnson is in trouble. Hey, man, the rest of these communists and what, they are in it. Fall back. Don't even, man, I mean, you can't say ignorant, in my opinion, and then you get all of this information, as he just said. Not only did they not share this with, he wasn't Reverend, with Mr. Johnson at the time. They don't share this with him and the other members. Mm-hmm. Not only that, they tell them, we'll give you a parade permit, but no guns. They know you're in danger, but no guns. Now, you can say, hey, we want a gun battle and all that. So you send them, at least you could tell them if it's going to be no gun. Now, you can't have any guns, and we're not going to tell you you are in danger. It's almost like we wanted Nelson Johnson to die. Am I being ignorant? Am I reading this correctly?
No, you aren't being ignorant at all. I think the most generous thing you could say to them in a situation like this is they were more afraid of Nelson Johnson and a small group of radical activists in Greensboro than they were of white supremacists with more than 100 years of blood on their hands. And if that doesn't demonstrate the kind of bias you're talking about, I don't know what does. And that's the most generous thing you could say. Much more likely that there was actually, the animus they felt toward Nelson and the other activists, was something they hoped would play out.
That's in those documents they shredded. Days of it. I don't even know if I've heard anything like that before. Normally it's like a day or hours. Days of shredding. And he's most of it. That Negro Nelson. Like, come on. Not to take up the entire evening, my last two questions, you write specifically, all of this in context for what I just said. Like they wanted this to happen. This is not ignorance. This is not the doofus defense. This is dedication to white supremacy, racism, and we are. Mr. Byrd might be correct. In fact, the layers is so many layers. They allegedly, Mr. Byrd said they tried to get me to go kill Mr. Johnson. When all of this happens, the person they blame most, Nelson Johnson. The person who is second most to blame, unless I misread, the black police officer who they said, oh yeah, it was his fault that we were lax here. Yeah, he was, I forgot his name, I'm sorry, but am I being accurate? Didn't they blame the black police officer?
You're 100% right. And that was something that I heard in interviews when I went to Greensboro. So I would talk to people and they would say, well, it was really Captain Trevor Hampton, who was the first black captain in the Greensboro Police Department. He was in charge that day. He's the one who made these decisions, and it was his fault. And that was completely false. The decisions were not made by Captain Hampton. They were made at the very top of the department and about how to handle the situation that day. And, he was absolutely scapegoated, and you're perfectly right. They, had black to blame on one side and black to blame on the other, and they used it not only for blame, but they used the black police officers to suggest that nothing racist could have possibly happened there because they had put them in charge.
They put them in charge. I could die. They put them in charge. It was Captain Hampton's fault. And he put the, Mr. Shetterly, he included the details of where all of these white officers were and took time off, go do tennis tournaments, play with their children. And hey, we could have blood in the streets of Greensboro. Like what is Captain Hampton? Like what? Come on. And now for additional context, we didn't even want Captain Hampton to begin with. We didn't want black people on the police department. He had included that as well. This is chapter 38. He wrote, Chief Swing also prioritized hiring minorities, non-white people, and women. Daugherty's career accelerated, and the percentage of minorities in the Greensboro Police Department rose from the low single digits in the 1960s to 17% by 1979, despite the less than welcoming reception some encountered when they arrived. In 1977, about a third of the training class was made up of women, including several black women. During a self-defense class, the trainer, Lieutenant Paul Spoon, called on a young black woman to help demonstrate a defensive combat move. He explained the move to the class and then, as the other trainees looked on, flipped her and slammed her to the floor. Turning onto her back, she gasped to recover her wind before climbing onto her hands and knees, but Spoon wasn't done. He came up behind her and kicked her. She pitched forward onto the floor as the other recruits gaped in silence. The woman ran from the room, blood streaming from a busted lip onto her khaki uniform. She never returned. Spoon kept his job and was assigned to protect the November 3 march by Captain Trevor Hampton. He's in charge of everything. One tactical services officer assigned to cover November 3 had been twiddling his thumbs at Fort Bragg. I so love the timing of this. They changed the names, so we're not going to have slave forts or forts named after slave owners and all that. No, sir. And this is another one. You can't say this is ignorance because it was thoroughly explained why we're changing the name from Fort Bragg. Slave owner, racist. We know this. Put it back. That's what we want. Fort Bragg, correctly named again. When Chief Calhoun showed up on a recruiting trip in 1974, the soldier jumped at the ticket out of the Army and moved to Greensboro. Quickly, he accumulated an impressive arrest record, which he attributed in large part, that might be the most important portion of this, in large part, to his knack for telling a bad black man from a good black man just by the way he walked. As a Greensboro police officer, if he spotted a bad black man, Nelson Johnson type, he'd just follow along behind him until the man did something the officer could pick him up for. Once he made an arrest, he'd establish proper hierarchy by referring to the man as boy. He didn't need to say nigger for his collar to understand the predicament he was in. If, despite the verbal cues, a black man gave any lip during the arrest, the elevator ride from the underground parking garage to the booking room offered a private place to deliver a more personal or more physical message. As Sylvester Doherty won promotions and ascended the GPD ladder, he became skilled at negotiating the department's complex and often contradictory racial politics, and he learned who to stay away from. One of those was Jerry Rooster Cooper, whose casual and frequent use of the N-word signaled to black officers something beyond shallow ignorance. Wow. To all of that and the context for the massacre, just that last phrase, well, all of that caught my attention. I had to change my highlighter color for all of that. The good black.
Well, can I tell you something?
Yes, sir.
About getting that, Gus?
Yes, sir.
May I? So I befriended a man in the police department who was surprisingly open with me and gave me the details. He was in that 1977 training class where that event happened, and told me about it. And he took me to a cop bar in Greensboro. And this is when you asked about, did anything happen? This was one of those times where I was a little worried at times. And he took me in, and we met another cop who was that cop from Fort Bragg who told me his story. So that came verbatim from the man himself, basically bragging to me about who he was and what a good cop he'd been. It was all I could do to keep my jaw off the floor. It was all I could do not to just walk out, but I thought, holy smokes, this guy is telling me this. He's giving me important context for this story. I'm going to stay right here and listen to every word and write down every word, and I'm going to put it in the book. And that was an absolutely stunning and chilling moment in my research.
So I'm sure he didn't say that when he gets some mouthy black dude and they don't know their place. I'm sure he didn't say, hey, I take him to the private place and I give him a more physical message. What did he say when he gets a mouthy black dude?
Well, that I did something a little bit subtle in the writing there. He didn't claim to do that quite himself. He said that was regularly done. So he switched from bragging about being able to tell the difference between a good black man and a bad black man to saying that this is what happened in the elevator. But yeah, it's pretty close. The language I used is pretty close. But he did talk about, he went into more detail that I felt was, in a book that's already long, about phone books and things, but I didn't feel like it was necessary to get the chilling point across.
Wow. I don't know. I just said for Black History Month, I said they should put a plunger out for Abner Louima, because, I mean, wow, you would be amazed at what happens in the private quarters of a police station. It might not.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't know if you remember that section of what the police did to the Communist Workers' Party members in New York after they started a riot there.
Yes, sir.
And tortured them all night long. So, yeah, absolutely. What happens in the basements of and elevators at police stations is, a terrorist crime sometimes. And we need to be mindful of that.
John Burge in Chicago as well, for sure. What the phrase is?
Well, that's connected to this history.
Right.
So Flint Taylor, who brought John Burge down, was one of the lawyers on the federal civil trial in Greensboro.
Oh, that's right. You included the information about the great win for Fred Hampton. We talked about that case in great detail, the COINTELPRO, and lots of Chicago connects in there as well. The phrasing "shallow ignorance," that's not in quotes, where you were talking about having to navigate Mr. Daugherty, if I'm saying it correctly. What do you mean when you say shallow ignorance?
I took that from Daughtry, and he was telling me about how he negotiated that department, and those were, and it's not in quotes, but basically those were really his words and sentiments. This was a guy who was ambitious and intended fully and did make a career of being a police officer. So he had to create categories for himself about what to stay away from and what, to engage with, because if he stayed away from everyone, he couldn't have a career. So that's really how I understood that.
Fascinating. That's dangerous. Wow. Then you could be blamed. They turn around and say it's your fault. It's like, woo, that is a tough job, Mr. Daugherty.
No, it's an incredibly tough job. And I was really grateful to him. I interviewed him 3 times in person and another time or 2 on the phone. And, that is, he has such a tough job, to your point. The job itself is tough, but then to be Sylvester Daughtry, a big, strong Black man who's ambitious in that job, is extraordinarily difficult.
Yikes. Dangerous. You sound like Nelson Johnson. Oh, man. Yikes. Oh, I feel so bad for Mr. Daughtry. Safety to you, Mr. Daughtry. The term caught my eye. I think we can maybe let you enjoy the rest of your Monday after this one. What do you mean? Because it's in the text a few times. What do you mean when you use the term militant? And specifically, what does a person do to be militant that is different from everybody else?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think it's so important, and I mean it in a complimentary way, not as a criticism. And it's interesting because it's such a provocative word. Even the Dr. Reverend William Barber uses the word militant nonviolent action. And what's meant by militant is doing something that creates a response, not just going out and holding up a sign or sending a tweet and, people can look at it or not, but forcing the institutions, the police force, the government, a business, if it is you're organizing, to actually respond to what you're doing and show their hand, to essentially reveal their biases, reveal their prejudices. And that's what militant means. It means being a smart organizer. And that's something that, Nelson Johnson was an absolutely genius of an organizer and a brilliant man. And he knew how to put people in positions to force a response. And when you can force a response, you have a better chance of winning. And he knew that.
Are individuals classified as white militant? Like, do they engage in behaviors to force a response from others?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the word militant can be used in a lot of different ways and apply to a lot of different people. But yeah, my intent was the one I just described. I mean, in a sense, you could use the word militant like the word gun, right? That a gun can be used in a lot of different ways, and so can the word militant. But I'm talking about someone who is, in this case, I'm certainly trying to talk about people who are advocating for justice in this country and that it stand up for what it says it believes in, not people who are, in a sense, trying to preserve the status quo in using terrorist activities.
Thank you for.
I mean, maybe I misunderstood your question.
No, I think that was militant. You gave me a thorough, I think, response to what I was asking in terms of what you mean militant in terms of someone who is trying to provoke a response towards, I think, justice is what it sounded like to me. Like,
yes, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, I think you answered the question. I ask consistently because it's been my experience. Most of the folks that I've asked, they do not say militant in any sort of context related to justice or provoking a response. Most of the time it'll be something related to firearms or something synonymous with radical or extreme activities that's vaguely defined. And I just noted that white people generally do not get defined as militant. It'll be just black people. And I've even... Did you?
Yeah, no, I think that, so for example, in this multiracial group of Communist Workers' Party people, all of those people intended to be militant. And I certainly thought of them as such, and they thought of themselves as such, and I have no doubt that the police force thought of them that way. Now, some of the white folks in the Communist Workers' Party didn't have the history in Greensboro with the police that Nelson Johnson had. And so they weren't going to be thought of the same way, A, because they didn't have the history, and B, because of their background and their race, for sure. But they certainly thought of themselves as militant.
I reckon it's in the text. I think it's exclusive. I'm going to look here since I have the e-copy. That was because I was trying to see, are any of the communist workers here in the text literally described as militant? And it seems like it's pretty consistently attached to the black. And it's beyond, this is beyond this is an in general. And I found it's a way to, like in the text, this is the way that it's more often used because you have it in quotes. So these are not your words. But this is page, or I'll give the chapter for folks. This is chapter 20. It's the FBI defined Malcolm X Liberation University as an institution established to produce black militants with the capability of extremist acts with their loyalty primarily to black people, regardless of the nation in which they live. I don't think they mean black people that are about justice and trying to provoke. It's like, these are dangerous criminals.
But those are the FBI's words, not my words.
Right.
I mean, and those are the FBI words, not Martin Luther King Jr.'s words. I mean, he used the word militant. So no. These are two different categories of the word. I mean, that's what's tricky about using a word. That's why I said, a word can be like a gun. It can be used in different ways. And that's obviously a very specific, institutionally racist use of the word.
For sure. That one is very, very common, has been my experience. Any hoodles. I think I got in all of my questions. I guess what would your response be if someone had that same viewpoint that Mr. Johnson had, that, hey, I don't think it is correct for non-white people and white people to be engaged in sexual activity until white supremacy racism has been resolved. We're not doing things with correct priorities and not even having appropriate suspicion for people classified as white like yourself. That love does not override appropriate suspicion of someone classified as white, even you. What would your response be, Mr. Shetterly?
I would say that's a form of oppression, and that one of the things that the most core things that we're fighting for in justice in this world is people to experience and feel love with whomever it is that they're touched by in that way. And I think that that's something that is should be a core value of justice work, is that love is a beautiful, big, unpredictable thing that has to be honored, and along with the work. But using ideology to, in a sense, shut down parts of the human experience, I don't believe is a successful or sustainable use of ideology.
Much obliged for the response. I'm just making sure I heard you correctly. You said it would be a form of oppression. Would that mean you personally would feel like you would be oppressed if someone had that point of view? If, hey, you're saying that I'm not allowed to, date who I want if it's a non-white person because we're in a system of white supremacy and racism?
No. I'm not talking about an opinion. I'm talking about a policy. Those are two totally different things. I have no problem with someone having that opinion. That's their opinion. I mean, they can say that all day long. But if there's an organization that I'm part of that has a rule like that, like the one you called out,
right,
I would no longer be part of it.
I see. Fascinating. Did any of your white family members, were they all acceptable with you marrying a black person, or did that produce some difficult conversations?
100%.
Oh, they all were?
No. Oh, yeah.
Wow. Fascinating. Much obliged for answering, getting all my questions. I think I nabbed everything. The book is I Learned a Ton. I did not know a whole lot about this, but I did not know this was going to have so much detail about COINTELPRO and all that about Mr. Byrd. I do indeed believe the Greensboro Police Department, yes, would get black dudes to go out and sell drugs. And yes, I do think Mr. Byrd, go shoot Mr. Johnson, we'll square your drug debt. I absolutely believe that, and I bet if we had those shredded documents, we might even have the facts, dates, times, all that corroborate everything he said. But I learned a ton. If we have any listeners in North Carolina, he gave us the date all the way to May. It's what is it? The book festival. It's the Greensboro Bound Book Festival. Is that the one in May?
That's the one in May. Yep. That's a great event. Worth attending. Yeah.
It sounds like it. It's, if you're in North Carolina, go to the Greensboro Bound Book Festival. Mr. Shetterly will be there talking about the book. Ask him about Henry Byrd Sr. If they have a Q&A, mandatory. Maybe just read that section before the event. Like, okay, Henry Byrd Jr., going to sell drugs and then kill us. Ask him about Mr. Byrd Jr. if he doesn't bring it up during the talk. I learned a ton at Mr. Nelson John. I should say Reverend Nelson Johnson. Hopefully we did his memory well. So much great information in the text about his life and times. You said you got to meet with him many times. So did he get to read the book before he passed away? Did he get to see it?
He did. He got to read it 2 times. I was incredibly grateful. Yeah.
Right on. Did he give thumbs up?
He did. Yeah.
Right on. Much obliged, Mr. Shetterly. Folks will be looking out for the upcoming book presentations down there in North Carolina. Keep up the great work. Enjoyed and learned a lot from Morningside, the 1979 Greensboro Massacre and the struggle for an American city's soul. Much obliged, Mr. Shetterly.
Great talking with you, Gus. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. Mr. Aran Shetterly, the book again, Morningside, just published. I didn't even know, like kind of hot off the presses, basically 4 months or so. Have a great evening. We will chat, sir.
Okay. Take care.
For sure. Context of...
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Context of White Supremacy, North Carolina history. Say that all the time, right? Wherever you happen to be, if you're in North Carolina, you should definitely get this book. This is another one. You can do the same library task. Now, he said it's in the libraries. He said Durham, Raleigh, Greensboro, he said it's there. He said they got like 10, not just one copy. He said they had a bunch of copies. Just came out. If they don't have it, go and ask. Brand new book. Shouldn't be no excuses. They have e-copies. They have audio book. I think it's unabridged. Yep, it's unabridged. They have the paperback. Well, I don't think they're back. I don't know if they have paperback. I know they have hardback. Ask them to get it. If they don't have it, if you're in North Carolina, that is like blasphemy. I wouldn't care what part of the state you're in, Wilmington, wherever, Charlotte, they should have this book in the library. If they don't, go find a white woman that works there. Ask, if they have an online form where you can submit it. It talks about COINTELPRO, Fred Hampton, Henry Byrd Sr. Saying that, dang, black male saying, dang, white police officer wanted me to sell drugs and kill Nelson Johnson. Like, what? What? Ask them if they don't have it at the library. Ask them, get this book. If they don't get it, then there you go. System. And I wouldn't even mention racism. This is North Carolina state history. This has nothing to do with Black History Month or any of that. This is North Carolina state history. That's why this book should be in all of the North Carolina public libraries, state institutions, community colleges, all of that. It should be super easily, maybe even free for folks, especially if you're a black person in North Carolina. Like, man, come on. Johnson family should have any of these books as they want, like piles of them just, stacked up there. Anyway, again, the whole reason Mr. Johnson just passed away literally a few weeks previously this year, 2025. So I'm so glad he was able to read this book before he transitioned. But I posted the New York Times article, and they are mentioned prominently in this text, different ways that they covered the massacre and then the subsequent, they call it Greensboro Truth and Reconciliation Commission, how they talked about that in the Times and all that. But when Mr. Reverend Johnson passed, I posted the obituary from the New York Times just because that's how I became aware of it. I didn't check, the Charlotte Observer, the Greensboro paper. I didn't check, any of those sources. I saw it in the Times. So that's where I shared it from. But the person, when they made the critiques of the Times obituary and the things that they left out of Mr. Reverend Johnson's obituary, that's what spurred me to investigate and say, hey, let's, get more information about his life and times. And wow, I mean, just basically spent his entire life as a victim of white supremacy, and not just the victim of white supremacy, like one of the most, if not the most, can you imagine living in a town where, based on evidence, the police conspire to kill you and express disappointment when you don't die? That was the life and times of Reverend Nelson Johnson. And he lived through all that. Again, he could have been killed at the massacre, November 3rd, 1979. He could have easily been killed. They were attacking him specifically. Someone attacked him with a knife. In the interview I played a snippet from at the beginning, he showed he couldn't even move. He didn't have full mobility in his hand because they severed the muscle. They went, I think they had like a hatchet or a butcher knife or something, and they literally came to kill him. And then, like I said, mad Negro still alive. and within all of that, still became a reverend at the end of his, and forgiving racists, all of that. Now, Dr. Welsing told us about all that. victims guaranteed qualified to the late great grandcestor, Reverend Johnson. I wish I'd asked Dr. Cambon about him, because I bet Dr. Cambon, North Carolina legend, I bet he knew quite a bit about Reverend Nelson Johnson. I'm sure of it. Man, that is a miss on my part. All the time we spent chatting it up with Dr. Cambon and visits to the program. Could have asked him, like, hey, man, what do you remember about the Greensboro Massacre, 1979? What do you remember? Lost up. That's why I say take advantage. If you have, like, aunties, uncles, grandparents, your parents, even anybody, even really if neighbors that are older, because I know some people, if you've been living in an area and maybe they're not, so-called blood relative, but non-white person that you have contact with, you've known them for a while, that they, are significantly older than you, ask them, did you live through Greensboro Massacre? Do you remember all that? Did you think all this was Reverend Johnson's fault for all these years? If you're in Chicago, you remember John Burge? Did you hear about him putting the electric cow prod on black males' testicles? You remember? You heard about all that? Fred Hampton, you remember all that? And they're trying to ask them, whatever it is, local events, national events, global events, ask them. It is amazing some of the things that people will recall and direct experiences. It might even jog memories about their own personal experience. Imagine Henry Bird's relatives if he never talked about this. The police did what? They wanted you to sell what? They want you to kill Reverend Johnson? Like, what? What? Anyway, we will hear from Reverend Johnson one more time. I cannot, you can go and hear from him directly. They have a lot of different, news clips over the past 30 years or so talking about this massacre from 1979, and they had a whole commission to go back and reinvestigate and watch and whatnot. They talked to some of the participants involved, but Reverend Johnson, his wife Joyce Johnson, lovely, they did a joint interview like 5 years ago, local North Carolina radio WFMY News, not radio, it's TV, news, but they did like a 50-minute interview. They give so much information. It is so just explicit about what they experienced, their attempted marriage, their, continued effort to replace white supremacy with justice over like a half century. Like, it is amazing. And even for an attempted marriage, having two black, and I mean, you are married to the most hated black dude in North Carolina, who of course can't get a job. How you gonna get a job and you are the most hated black male in North Carolina? It's like you and Robert F. Williams, most hated black dudes in North Carolina. How you gonna get a job? And then how you gonna be married to the most hated black dude in North Carolina? What kind of marriage is this gonna be? How you going to school and your dad is the most hated black dude? I shouldn't laugh because that's not funny at all, but they talk about all of that in that interview. It's from like 5 years ago. WFMY News 2 out of North Carolina. I'll share it on North Carolina. This is just a snippet, again, of Reverend Johnson and his wife Joyce talking about the impact of the November 3, 1979 massacre on their children, which, I mean, man, it staggered me. That's why I said we had to play this, because, I mean, wow. I don't know if he had talked about all this, but, I mean, that cannot be overstated. Your dad almost gets killed, and then they charged him. We didn't talk about that. They charged him inciting a riot and all the rest of it. And then when they finally get a civil conviction, because none of the Klan and Nazi members were convicted for any of this. None of them. Not one. When they finally get a civil conviction for all this bloodshed and 5 murders, Reverend Johnson does not collect 1 penny. Black male privilege. But what is it like to be the offspring of the most hated black dude in the state of North Carolina? Let us hear.
And another one, and another one. It's so gorgeous. It's another beautiful day in North Carolina, y'all. Y'all should really be here to see it. You know what I'm saying?
We marched to Raleigh and got released Kwame Cannon, the governor, who was Jim Hunt at the time, that I got to meet and talk to. The mayor of the city went down with us, Carolyn Allen, and we got that man released. He was given 2 consecutive life sentences as a 17-year-old child because his mother was a part of our organization. So we've carried on this work, and we're still carrying it on. Perhaps the greatest challenge that we've faced is we've not been able to get the city to take serious that the police department cannot be what it ought to be without some deep changes on the inside. Some cosmetic things have been done. We acknowledge those. But we put out a booklet, you see it over here, our Democratic Mission, that laid out a process. And the chief objectively sped on it, you know, and denounced it.
You mentioned this has had an impact on your children. Tell me about that. What has it done to them?
On the 25th anniversary, my youngest daughter just broke down and cried because they were 7 and 8 years old. They were taunted in school by other children who said, "Your daddy got people killed." My daughter says she only fought one time, and that was over that issue. There were janitors and maids at the school who knew us and knew this wasn't true. There was some comfort in them sharing with us that they would look after our children. But to see your father being wrestled to the ground and beaten by the police and jail, even though the charges were later dropped, affects a child. And I thank God that they have endured this and have matured into young ladies that I'm proud of. One of them is at North Carolina Central. She's an administrator there. And the other one is a nurse who's a nurse manager with one of the larger drugstores and I don't know, what do they call it?
I'm not sure, but what the other end of it has made them some of the more compassionate women that I know, and very effective in what they do, but very people-centered. But we
Sounds like they take after you guys.
you know, children probably never like to admit that, but I suspect so. But but it's just that having to grow up through that. And so when I see, say, the young kids at the border, I think about it. When I see young people in other countries going through a lot of struggles, I think about not just our children, but other children who have had to endure things as their race, their particular parents or whatever are being targeted, you know, and it does impact folk. But the good thing is, as I said, we've just seen a lot of compassion and what have you out of them, as opposed to some of the negative things that often happen to young people, you know. So far so good, but you never know the impacts. There are some young people out of Morningside homes where this happened told us that after some of them had seen people shot down in the street, and they knew some of the people because we were very active in the community, that nobody showed up there that Monday morning, or certainly not that Sunday, to offer counseling or whatever. They just had to go to school, suck it up, this just happened. So it wasn't just our friends who were killed, but a community was terrorized, and actually our whole city was under constant police surveillance. You could hear helicopters up in the air and what have you. Going in and out of your home, you had to be worried about whether you would get shot. There were people who knew us and whom we had helped, had worked with around housing issues or around loss of job or whatever. They were frightened for a while because these were folk who were doing good in the community, yet they've been killed.
And from the late 1960s, after the death of Martin Luther King and the riots and the upheavals and all like this, and black people with their fists in the air and all like that, and trying to stumble and fumble and find their way and get focus, the white supremacists made a blueprint and put it in action. And that is, I'll have these people so confused, they don't even know what they started out to do. And by the late 1970s, they had just about completed it. And we've been on that ever since. And you mentioned something very important. They are more comfortable than ever. But see, it's like making gorillas comfortable in a cage, or monkeys, or pandas. You still got them in a cage, but they're comfortable. See, so give him some bling bling. It's like giving an animal a brand new car and training the animal to ride up and down the street in it. And then you stand back and point at the animal. Like one white man said in the late 1950s, he said he doesn't care what kind of car a Negro has. He said he's still a nigger. And when he rides by in a shiny car, to him, it's just a monkey in a car. White people built a car, put a monkey in it, trained the monkey to drive the car, so now you're looking at a monkey in a car. See, but black people don't see themselves that way. But this is how the white supremacists see us, and they are the ones who run our business. And we have to know that when they look at us, that's what they see. That's what they see. That's what they see. And at a subliminal level, what they see begins to spill over into our brains so that we, at a subliminal level, see each other that way. And indirectly see ourselves that way.
Context of White Supremacy. Minimum. We will be here Thursday for the book club. We'll be here Thursday for Neutralizing Workplace Racism. Friday for the Catherine Massey Book Club. Switcheroo. If we pop up before then, just pay attention. Social media, I'll be sure to share, keep you abreast. Invest if you think the cows is constructive. Gus T looking to be in Wisconsin at the end of May for the Sade Robinson murder trial, and then in Buffalo, mentioned 22 caliber killings mentioned in this here book, Morningside, looking to be in Buffalo at the in this autumn, end of September. So if you think it would be constructive to have Gus T reporting live from both of these, I think, very important trials, Invest that is the plan to give daily trial updates from both trials, Milwaukee, Buffalo. What a year. Invest, hit the blog, racism-notes.blogspot.com, racism-notes.blogspot.com, PayPal button, top right corner. You'll see the links for Cash App, Venmo, and PayPal. Enormous gratitude to all of the investors who've kept us on the air for 16 years. You can also hit the Amazon wish list under Gus T. Renegade. Hopefully we have been worthy of your time and energy, accurate more often than not. We had a slight delay with the beginning of the broadcast. I called our guest valuing time and energy. I confirmed called or contacted our guest the day before to let him know, yes, we're on. I'll call you for the broadcast Monday evening, a little bit before 8 p.m. I called him at about 7:58, 7:59 his time, and it went directly to voicemail. So I messaged him, said I'll wait 5 minutes, try again. I tried again. I thought it picked up, but it disconnected in like a second. Like I didn't get a chance to respond because I didn't hear a voice. I waited because it sounded like someone did connect. So I was waiting to see if someone was going to speak. Did I get, did I not get voicemail this time? Maybe he picked up. I waited, and before I got a moment to say, oh, wait a minute, hello, am I just not hearing you? Hello, hello. The person hung up. So I was like, oh man, what's, did we get disconnected? What's going on? So I called back. It went to voicemail again. So at that point, it's like, what is going on? Is this racist shenanigans? Like, what? Yeah. So I message him again, and that's why we had a little delay, didn't get to start right on time for people who were with us live, called in, or what have you. And so I had posted on social media and such, I shared the program. Now, my reflex, if I think there's going to be some shenanigans, because sometimes I've told you, we have listeners, they sabotage. Once they see who the guest is, sometimes they'll go and try and contact them and don't talk to that, militant Gus, don't mess around with him. He's got them tricky questions. Or racists themselves will look online and see, like, what? He called me a suspected racist? What? Oh, no, I'm not talking to them. That sort of thing. So I don't even post and share the guest who's coming on, all that, until almost we get ready to go live. I shared it, and then there was all this difficulty, interference in getting Mr. Shetterly on the program. So I deleted. And it took a while. I think it took about 10, 15 minutes. We started, kind of late. That's why we're a little over, because we started kind of late to actually get him on the program. For a minute, I was thinking he was going to stand us up or was trying to pull something late, practicing racism. And I was just going to come on and say that. And, happened again twice this month. I was going to be really disgruntled. Plus, I was looking forward to discussing this content. Really important, I think. But we were able to get him on. And he said that he was suspicious because it was a restricted number, and so he wasn't sure. Now, I had a side eye on that, because regardless if it's a suspicious number, it comes up as an Alaska number, alien number, whatever, you were aware, hey, I'm going to be calling you, and it's going to be at about 7:58 p.m. I mean, you get a call at 7:58 when you are expecting a call, I would answer. Why would it? Hey, why is someone calling me at 7:58? I'm expecting a call at 7:50. Come on. Anyway, so I started with a little bit of a side eye, but I had my yerba mate tea. I calmed, took some deep breaths, calmed, looked at my notes. Let's get to it. In fact, pause. I had done my homework. I had read the entire book cover to cover. Generally, I say, regardless of what happens, if I have time to read the entire book for a white person that we're going to talk to, it should be fine. Like anything, if you don't get to ask questions or what have you, that's your fault. You read the whole book. You should be informed. Let's roll. Kwame Cannon, Mr. or Reverend Johnson, spoke about their efforts to get him released from prison. This is from the News and Record Greensboro newspaper. Cannon is released from prison. Kwame Cannon and the community celebrate his release. His face crumpling with emotion, Kwame Cannon walked out of prison Wednesday, freed after serving almost 13 years of a double life sentence for burglary. His friends and fellow inmates at Randolph Correctional Center gathered at the prison fence shortly before 9 a.m. as Cannon, dressed in prison whites, began his slow walk across the prison yard to the gate and freedom. I don't know about that F word. Some rushed to embrace the slight, wiry young man once known to many as the Greensboro cat burglar. "You can do it, Kwame," and one of them shouted as Cannon approached the gate. "You'll make it," another yelled. "Hold your head up, brother." Don't call me brother. Governor Jim Hunt commuted Cannon's sentence last week to time served and ordered the prison to release him Tuesday. Hunt acted after more than 1,000 people, most of them from Greensboro, urged him to release Cannon and complained about the inordinate length and harshness of his sentence. Cannon was sentenced to 2 life terms in 1986 when he was 17 years old after pleading guilty to the first-degree burglary of 6 homes in northeast Greensboro. He acknowledged breaking into and burglarizing as many as 40 homes. Cannon's buddies cheered and applauded as Cannon, now 30, walked through the gate and under the fence's sharp razor wire. Cannon choked back sobs as he waved and walked the gauntlet of reporters and camera crews to the waiting car of his probation officer who would drive him to Greensboro. And apparently they did a whole documentary about this. Let me give a little bit more because Mr. Johnson's in here. Meanwhile, as Cannon began the 30-mile drive up US 220, a highway flanked by woods and fields beginning to flower with the new life of spring, friends and supporters in Greensboro prepared to welcome him home with a celebration at Faith Community Church. At that celebration, called Jubilee 2000, Kwame Cannon Homecoming, the Reverend Nelson Johnson, with Cannon at his side, announced the establishment of a Kwame Cannon Prison Justice Fund would be used to identify and work for the release of thousands of other Kwame Cannons who may be serving unjust sentences. Johnson said the effort, to be spearheaded from the Pulpit Forum, an organization of ministers from predominantly black churches, would result in a data bank as we seek to address a state with 30% black population and a 65% black prison population. 5 or 6 generations from slavery, there's something profoundly wrong with that, Johnson said, as Cannon nodded his head vigorously and people in the packed church cheered. And we'll stop and leave it there. But that is, I mean, for someone who's been through so much, he could have easily been killed, Reverend Johnson, and to remain dedicated to replacing white supremacy with justice and to help get this young fella out. And Mr. Cannon, his parents were in the Communist Workers' Party. They were a part of the massacre, the victims, November 3rd. And so they felt, hey, he was being punished for his parents' involvement in this case. That's what this is. And so to give him, he got a double life sentence. Totally incorrect. You shouldn't be breaking into houses, but just contrast that. Black male breaking into 40 houses, double life sentence. Mob of white terrorists kills 5 people, 4 of them white. 0 convictions. What does it mean to be white? There's a whole documentary about all of this called Greensboro's Child. I think that's the name of it. But if anybody can locate it, track it down, that would be a great one to watch. Should be mandatory viewing if you live in the Greensboro, North Carolina area. Our caller who dialed in, flag on the play. This caller, victim, has dialed in before. I am still learning myself, trying to do better, but I do not use that sort of language, phrasing on the broadcast, flag on the play, and I'm pinpointing that metaphor specifically. You use a lot of metaphors. You used a lot of metaphors when you called in last time. It was you let him off the hook. Flag on the play, it suggests we're playing tackle football or some sort of athletic competition. That is not what this is at all. If the person didn't answer the question, you have another question to ask, or you can just say, you didn't answer the question. That's why I talk about the significance of metaphors and words. As opposed to saying bedroom integration, you mean a white person raped a black person? Be accurate, be specific. That is massively important for counter-racism, because white people, they are master deceivers. When you're accurate and precise with words, that greatly restricts, limits, neutralizes someone who aims to be deceptive. In addition, the metaphors, I mean, this is not a game. We are not playing football. This is not the Super Bowl and the Eagles. We're talking to someone we suspect is a racist, at minimum. At minimum. Just be specific. Like I said, you didn't answer the question. That's what I've been saying. Same thing happened previously when I asked questions. I asked him, do you think a substantial number of people classified as white are sincerely and greatly pained? He didn't answer the question. You didn't answer the question. That's all you have to do. That is way. I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, flag? Do I have a flag? Do we have flags to throw here? We're on the phone. Like, what are you talking about? Words are very important, and I make every effort to not model that sort of speech on the broadcast, especially when talking with a white person, especially. And it just sounds so unserious. Like, are you playing Madden? Like, what? Let's be precise with our words. Same thing that I said to that white man with here. Let's be precise with our words. Are you talking about rape? Well, let's call it that. Words are important. Let's see. Love. That right there is why I say replace white supremacy with love. Because we say love about everything. I'm with a black female because love just, you can't be oppressive and restrict love. Love just had that, all of that. We've talked about that before in great detail. All this love in the context of white supremacy and racism. And again, replace white supremacy with love. Why you say that from time to time, Gus? To remind people we do not have love. You cannot have love in a system of white supremacy racism. Fullers say love and justice, one and the same. That is right. That's why I say it from the time to time, so people know it ain't no love. That's not what all this is. This is, Whoopi Goldberg and Kevin Costner. Why he say that? Because his black female wife wrote Hidden Figures about the black females who worked at NASA, made into a movie with Kevin Costner. I found that just, wow. Like, what? How did that, what? But, yes, anyway, he is married to the writer, Hidden Colors, that's it. His wife, Margot Lee. Hidden Colors, The American Dream, and the Untold Story of the Black Women Mathematicians Who Helped Win the Space Race. Pardon, had to cough. That is fascinating, especially because the sexual component comes up so much in the book. But yeah, cowbell for many reasons in the text. Let's see. The white people are ignorant. When I asked him, or I read that portion from the book about the Kerner Commission and them suggesting that white people don't understand, but they're in charge, they dominate the ghetto and condone all of the abuse of black people who are cordoned off there. And he commenced to chuckling before he responded. He had a number of what I think we've highlighted over the years, inappropriate laughter where there's nothing funny, but he commences to snickering, or he or she, because we've had many white people do this. That I thought was so important, because the contradiction, white people, and he came up with all the doofus defense that's in the book and all this old nonsense, willed ignorant. How can white people be ignorant about racism? Really, you could put the question mark right there. But especially in that context, how can white people be ignorant when they own the ghetto, dominate the ghetto, condone the ghetto? How are they ignorant about it? That does not make sense. I can only again highlight it is so critically important in the system of white supremacy racism that white people have their non-white people think white people are ignorant about racism. That seems to be mandatory. It cannot be white people are super duper smart, scientific PhDs on the system of white supremacy racism. And really, by the time they're 5, they got a PhD in white supremacy racism. And we black people are dunces, idiots, don't know nothing about what it means to be white. Nothing. We are so resistant. That's why when Fuller says smartest people in the known universe, racist man, racist woman, and we get mad about that. And then turn around, that's a dumb white man. All the racists are ignorant. Come on. But he snickered there before he responded. He snickered. Doofus defense and all that. I never even heard that. The doofus defense. Come on. And when he, in the book, he didn't give the doofus defense about Scottsboro. Now that's one. I do have a history degree. For some things, I do not look. Rosa Parks, when Dr. Maya Angelou, when she wrote Montgomery Bus Boycott happened in 1958, I knew that was wrong. I did not need to look. The Scottsboro Boys case, I knew that is Alabama history. We have talked about that case over and over and over and over. I did not stop to investigate. Now, when he said the train was going between Tennessee, which it is listed, but they were not arrested and stopped, detained until they got to Alabama. That's where the court case happened. That's why it's called the Scottsboro Boys, Scottsboro, Alabama. That's where they have a marker for the Scottsboro Boys. That sort of thing I always point out as important, and I even back up, you can check my record. It's a whole lot. Like my man Eric Brian Stone, guest back on the break. You can check my record, 16 years. I have called out a lot of white people for that sort of sloppiness. You are a Harvard-educated white man. There are so many books. Fuller even talked about the Scottsboro Boys case, Jesus Christ, that should be the easiest. Scottsboro, Alabama is an actual place. If you have any sort of even a tidbit, a peanut of geographical knowledge, oh yes, this Alabama, yes. That sort of sloppiness is totally unacceptable from any white person in talking about white supremacy, racism, much less a Harvard-educated white man. You have got to be out of your flipping mind. You have editors and what have you who look through this. Your black female wife, Hidden Figures, that is an Alabama story. Unless I've been mistaken, dang. It's so many, that is totally unacceptable. In every way, shape, form. That sort of sloppiness, I generally look, it does not really matter. This is just Negro history, so whatever, Scottsboro, Alaska, they were in jail in Illinois, whatever. Rosa Parks, they were protesting in 1960, 1940, 1920. It doesn't really matter. It's Negro history. Who cares? That's what it smacks of to me. Anybody, really, white person, non-white person, but it is totally unacceptable from a white Harvard grad. Get your information together. Tacky at best. Let's see. No black people suspected him of being racist. He said he did not encounter that at all. and he talked to lots of black people. We have heard that over and over as I've been asking these white people who go out and write these books and sometimes put together a lot of great accurate information aside from the Scottsboro case. But hey, did any black people, because we got to spend all that, Dr. Welsing used to say that let's not waste any time hating white people. And I've said for years, where are these mythical black people that hate white people? Do you know any? I don't know any. I've never talked to a white person that, man, I ran into Leroy. Whoo! He hates whitey. I couldn't get a sentence. He told me to get off his porch, don't come back, went to get his pistol. I ran. Had to hop in my Tesla and, whoo, hightail it out of there. I've never heard that. I have never heard that. The most I've heard is the non-white people were maybe a little bit suspicious for 30 seconds or so, but we talked for a few seconds, and I told them that I knew a few Drake songs or Kendrick Lamar songs or whatever. I'd read some Maya Angelou poems, and we became thick as thieves. We went in and had fried chicken and everything. That's what I've heard over and over and over and over, no exceptions, unanimously. That's what I've heard. Suspicious of white people, please. And the whole city, you heard that from Joyce Johnson, that white people had the whole city, black people, under surveillance, which is exactly what we heard from Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly. He said before there was an FBI, he said, black people are suspect. They're treated like garbage. Their loyalties are suspect. So we got to keep an eye on them. We got snitches and spies and informants everywhere. That's what he said. Barbershop is a great look at. That's what we brag about, the barbershop, and that's what he said. We love the barbershop. Woo! Go get all the details. And how are white people? They got so much info. Now, I want you all to think. You can pick any subject matter in the world. Cryptocurrency, fried chicken, your children, your sexual partners, your medical history, your academic career, pornography collection, fantasy football seasons, anything you can think of. How long would it take you if you had to destroy all of that information? How long would it take? I'm pretty sure it's not very many of us at all have so much data on one subject. Whew. I'm going to be making 15, 30 trips to the dumpster. I'm going to have to get a wheelbarrow. Like, I don't know. I'm going to be burning stuff for days. I don't think it's going to be very many of us that's got that. But he said they had so much material to destroy, mostly about that Negro. We got to shred for days. All that intel is not ignorance. I'm sure it was not just racist jokes, but that Negro, I'm sure that's not what it was. Especially if what Joyce Johnson said, we were under surveillance, the whole city. Last thing I'll say, in my view, I don't want no redactions. I'm not a child. Don't talk to me like I'm no child. Meaning, you don't come talk to me and say, well, N-word. Come on. They got kike in the book. Spelled out K-I-K-E. Kike. You can spell out Negra. And even, in fact, because sometimes they do spell it out, N-I-G-G-R-A. Sometimes they will spell it out exactly the way I say it. Now, sometimes they will go ahead and give you the N-I-G-G-E-R. Say what they said. If a white police officer comes home and tells his white wife, we didn't get that Negro, I don't want no N-word. And the white wife knew. My husband came home and he said we didn't get that Negro. My race soldier husband with a nigger knocker and a badge and a gun came home and said, "We didn't get that nigger." And I knew he meant Nelson Johnson. Nah, man, don't redact none of that. I'm grown. Ain't nothing worse than killing 5 white people and blaming it on a black dude. Go ahead and write nigger. And I knew he talking about that nigger, Mr. Johnson, Reverend Johnson. And how many conversations have they had in the house about Nelson Johnson? They just come and talk about nigger Johnson every day. Nigger Johnson, nigger Johnson, nigger Johnson, nigger. Oh, nigger Johnson did it. What nigger Johnson do today? You still ain't got nigger Johnson? You gonna get nigger Johnson? I bet. Wait till the 3rd. You gonna get nigger Johnson? Who is ignorant about race? I don't even have to say his name, and you know who up there. That nigger Johnson gonna get it. Anyway, we will be back. Let's see. Victim times 3. He asked phenomenal request, compensatory investment request for the book. Man, it's been my experience, especially with new books, generally speaking, white people can get their paws on a free book. I have got racks and racks and racks of them. Dr. Martin Kevorkian gave us free books when he came on the program. I got a signed copy right on my bookshelf right there, and a number of other Cows listeners did too. They got free copies of books, and he said the same thing. I didn't have no New York Times bestseller like Mr. Shetterly's Black Female Wife. I got a raggedy old book that didn't sell a lot, and he still gave out free copies of the book. And Mr. Fuller, Grandcester, Victim of Racism, he certainly didn't have no bestseller. He gave out free copies of his book as well. And I know people that I put my hand on. They got free copies of his book. They didn't even beg. They didn't even do what Victim Cube did. They didn't do that. Go begging Mr. Fuller. I'm poor and I've been laid off and I'm a federal employee. They didn't do all that. They were asking him questions about dealing with workplace racism. Mr. Fuller said, "I will look out for you. I'll send you a couple of books, Victim. See if you can't figure some things out or two. Look out for it in the mail." No questions asked. No, don't even worry about it. I got you. I try to look out for Victim every now and then. Replace white supremacy with justice. Send them free books. Not even one. Free books. Bro, we didn't even get no. We didn't get no racist joke. We didn't get no books. Oh well. Anything you wanted to add? Victim times 3. Great request though. Always ask, especially for things that are constructive. We should ask the people who have the ability to give. Anything you want to add before we wrap up?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I was pretty disappointed that you couldn't give out a book, and you're absolutely right. I mean, other people who appears on this program, even Dr. Kevorkian, his request was years prior to me, I guess, taking him up on that offer to get a free book from him. So, yeah, I think he could have obliged a couple books. But, yeah. His laughter from the very beginning of the program was offsetting. He laughed at the most inconvenient times, and also he laughed during you questioning about the definition of racism. I thought that was definitely interesting. It's like you caught him practicing racism, but didn't want to admit to practicing racism. That's how I took that. And then throughout the course, he still kept laughing. His, lack of definition for the word love also stood out to me. He used it, and he used it in a way like that's the answer. It's love, man. It's the whole. Come on, man. You don't have a definition of what you said. No. Let me say that he did give a quote unquote. Did he give that? No. He used another term. He used friendship. That's what he did. He used another term to define the word love. Just tacky, trifling, all the way through from this guest. When I heard you brought up the quote-unquote spouse, that kind of got me. I was like, wow, this person is married to a victim of white supremacy, and the whole time practicing racism and laughing all the way through it, and can't even spare one measly crumb of a book. Yeah, it's, you know, it's it should be expected, and you know, we should just take that and as a confirmation that, for me, that just solidifies this person as a racist white supremacist, unadmitted, but a racist white supremacist nonetheless. Yeah, he wanted people to come out to his seminar. I mean, people should go and definitely question in public. I unfortunately won't be able to attend a public viewing of the book, of his, I guess, his tour or whatever. But yeah, went to Harvard, well-educated white man, lots of resources, I suspect, and couldn't give up the book. I mean, I'm really upset that I didn't get that book. But great program nonetheless, Gus. I appreciate you having this guest. Thank you so much.
Bravo. Excellent compensatory investment request. We should do more of those for white people. But Harvard, I had to bring that up repeatedly. Like they even do that. Like, do they let doofuses in Harvard? We've had that a few times. Like, hey, Brother Gus, don't be thinking everybody at Harvard is intelligent now. I mean, they have some ignorant folks at Harvard. What? Wait. Let me go. They got dumb. Let me go hang out. See if I can go hang out. Yeah, they got a whole lot of ignorant folks up here, man. I thought they'd been tricking us all. I thought they had smart ages. Ignorant as can. Come on. Anyway, they do the same thing. The only full of line they quote. Still learning, Brother Gus. Ignore that Harvard degree and magna cum laude. Don't even pay attention. You speak multiple languages. Silencia. I'm still learning, Brother Gus. I got the doofus defense, Brother Gus. I'd never heard that one before. I suspect if his partner, attempted wife, if she heard you, victim, or this, she might be upset with us. What do you mean? Practicing racism all the while. Might even agree with him. It is love. She said they've been together for 20 years. Wow. I bet he was probably at the premiere when Hidden Figures with Kevin Costner, when it debuted. Was Viola Davis in that? I think maybe she wasn't. I haven't seen that in a long time. But I bet he was probably at the premiere because they were married then. That was, within the last 20 years. I bet everything in the world that his wife was there. She wrote the book, so she had to be at the red carpet premiere and all that. How would he not be there? Come on. And got hobnobbing and taking pictures and not racist. See, look at that. Me and Kevin Costner. That's two white people for sure. Not all white peoples is racist. Me, Kevin Costner. Whitney told you so. We miss you, Whitney. Man. Worthy of great pity. I had to do like a double take on that. Like, what? His wife wrote Hidden Figures? Like, the Kevin Costner Hidden Figures? The NASA Hidden Like, what? Man. And we would probably get shot down. Like, they would say, yeah, that is a great white man. Like, I'm sure even the black people in North Carolina would probably say, that is a great white man. He took time and hung out with us and blah, 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 and built up trust, and victims guaranteed qualified. Anyway, that documentary, Kwame Cannon is Greensboro's Child, came out in 2002. I said, and it includes information on the 1979 massacre and contrasting how did all of these white race soldiers, they killed 5 people, 4 white people. How did they get away totally innocent? No crime, no convictions, no nothing. A black 17-year-old is breaking into houses and he gets a double life sentence? Shout out to North Carolina. Anyway, Catherine Massey Book Club on Friday, Neutralizing Workplace Racism on Thursday. I suspect this book having so much COINTELPRO information in it, that might have influenced the compensatory investment request. Now, some of the languaging, him not referring to rape, these white men, slave owners, raping these black females that they owned, many aspects will say, oh yeah, that's a white man practicing racism and writing a book, what I would expect. But that notwithstanding, the COINTELPRO information and what have you and how all this was coordinated, Henry Byrd Sr. alone. The police wanted me to go out and peddle narcotics and then kill Nelson Johnson so they could blame it on a privileged black male with footnotes. Come on. And then, like I said, the other side, and all this was Captain Hampton's fault anyway. If he had behaved himself and took it seriously and scheduled all this, we would have been better prepared. What? Racial showcasing, like, dang, I'm not even, y'all don't even, you call me nigger every day, and black male privilege. Anyway, we'll be back Thursday minimum. If before, check social media. Sobriety would be best under conditions of white supremacy. Protect your brain computer. That's it. No name calling black people. There's so much of that in the book, like what nigger and all the rest of it, but there's so much. Man, this is white people name calling black people, black militant, that's one too, radicals. It's so much name calling of black people. No gossiping, so lots of gossiping. Like, man, just follow the 10 stops. No throwaway offspring. Reverend Johnson, Mrs. Joyce Johnson, they valued their black offspring. You can tell by fruit don't fall far from the tree, as they say. Their children are doing very well. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in. Nelson Johnson. Nelson Johnson. Nelson Johnson.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
No problem. You're a victim.
Yeah. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.